the meeting, planning and zoning committee meeting to order. And this is now we're at 5:00 on Monday, March 31st. And we're gonna look at first, our rural zoning project update.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. You'll notice I'm a little bit short-handed tonight, so yeah, just Marion and myself tonight. We still have all hands on deck on this project, but we have conferences and some previously requested time off. But I think the two of us can handle it for you. So, just a reminder on the schedule and where we're at. So we're into March now, and here we are at that P&Z committee meeting. So you have the full survey results, so there's an opportunity here to start the meeting off going through that, just in general terms, to see if you have any questions or some immediate feedback on the survey results. And then we'll go through the different code comparisons and suggested options to change the code based on some of the provisions that are part of this project scope. And hopefully you had an opportunity to look through the interim report. I know there was a lot of information in there, a ton of tables, a ton of numbers, but hopefully you found it helpful, at least in terms of guiding the discussion tonight on where we want to go. So next step after this, we'll head into code drafting based on the direction that you all give us on what you'd like to see in terms of changes. And then we'll come back to you in May with another committee meeting to give you our final report and our drafted text amendments and any other recommendations that we might have, and you'll be able to deliberate on that and make any recommendations or suggestions before it goes on to planning commission and full council. So one other thing that was mentioned at council the other night was public input. Now there is a public hearing that's a part of this as well. With the condensed schedule, we didn't have an opportunity to inject that in the front end. But there is probably an opportunity to go to some public meetings, probably western parts of the county, southern parts of the county, have some meetings in those areas to present what I think probably is most appropriate is some of what those final amendments and recommendations might look like. So it's up to y'all on how you'd like us to proceed with the public input meetings, because we can delay the schedule a little bit to have those come ahead of the readings, or we can incorporate them throughout the readings if it's planning commission and throughout. We're looking for your feedback on in terms of timing on getting those public input meetings.
Okay. I mean, you want us
Yeah,
to talk about it right now?
Yeah, if you could provide some of your thoughts now, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, so how many are you thinking about having?
Well, county is very large geographically. Mercifully, I think there are some areas of the county that a lot of these changes really wouldn't affect them at all. But we do want to make sure that we afford people an opportunity to attend the meeting without having to drive 40 minutes, half an hour to get to a venue. So we probably have them at 3 or 4 different locations throughout the county to make sure we have an opportunity to have multiple input sources. We can also do direct stakeholder meetings with, for example, the Farm Bureau, get some of their membership to show up and have maybe more of a focus group setting rather than a large meeting with some of the drafts available for viewing.
What about other industry-based groups, Jonathan? For example, I don't see a lot of this going out to big engineering firms necessarily, but maybe your local surveyors who may do a lot of work,
Yep.
people like that who are a little bit closer to these issues.
Yeah, local surveyors, developers, real estate folks will certainly have an interest in what's going on here.
Okay, so April. Before it goes to the final, before it goes to that final staff report, you want the, I think.
Well, it's our suggestion that, we're not really gonna have anything to show folks, in public meetings until we have our final staff report done, which we're targeting in May with this schedule. And so sometime either during May, or after May, or once you're in your adoption cycle of the planning commission or readings of council, somewhere in there. So we can either, space out, the timing between the final report in May and the commencement of planning commission and council readings, or we can have them run concurrently. So we can be out in the public, and some people might be speaking at the public hearing who haven't done a public input meeting yet, or vice versa. But we're looking for your thoughts, because I know
Okay,
there's
so you've got
somewhat
council,
competing priorities of speed
Right.
versus input.
you got council on May fifth and 19th, and then planning commission on the 12th. So if you're going in May, do you want it after the second council meeting in May, like after the 19th?
Well, based on this schedule, we'd be coming to the committee in May, so we wouldn't go to planning commission until June.
Until June, okay, so that's good. Okay, so then you've got, but you've got Memorial Day weekend in there. And so the planning commission will be on June the 9th. So the week of the 19th, May 19th, you got that option to do one or two or whatever you're talking about? And
Well,
then,
what if I make this suggestion, if you, come up with the target date for your next committee meeting, because that will be your opportunity to hear what the recommendations are, all those draft amendments, you can comb through them. Because honestly, you might have a committee meeting where we provide you drafts and you go through them, and you could say, in theory, yeah, these are all great, exactly what we're looking for, let's chug along. Or you might look through it and say, that's not quite what we're looking for, or now that I'm seeing it on the page, I think maybe we should go in this direction. So I do think you wanna build in some latitude for yourselves, cause there are a lot of moving pieces to this.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I might have said in another meeting, every thread that we pull, it's gonna loosen another one down the chain in the text of the code.
okay,
So we don't wanna pigeonhole yourselves into a timeline that's gonna
exactly.
force unforced errors.
Okay, what's y'all's thoughts on another meeting before?
I'd say public input between the April meeting and the final. I would hate for y'all to get to the final and then we get some input
Well,
that makes
yeah,
a major
yeah,
change and
yeah,
y'all have to
do
go back
that,
and
yeah.
redo all your work. Really
Okay,
don't
so
want
the
y'all to do.
planning and zoning committee, okay, now are you gonna put it out to the, planning commission in May? You wanna do that, or you wanna wait till June?
Yeah, so, and maybe I'm not communicating what we would be delivering to the committee. The committee, we'd be delivering you all of the text amendments. And so, really, the order of operations is it's gonna come to the committee's gonna make a recommendation to the full council. Now, as has happened previously, the committee of three might say, yeah, we're good, we want an amendment to come forward, but maybe the full council, there's not a fourth vote that says, yes, let's bring all this forward. Maybe they send it back to y'all first. That could happen in theory also. There's so many permutations to how the schedule might wrap up on the back end of it. But really, your next meeting is when we're gonna give you all the text, and now there's decision
Yes,
points
okay.
on,
So that's gonna be in May.
yes. And so really,
So now we-
those are the things that the community can react to. And you can kind of do public input in two different ways. You can either tell us what all the problems are. I think we kind of know what the problems are. And we might not get a whole lot of new information on that if we do it ahead of presenting them the findings. If we show them the findings and here are some draft code amendments, they can say, oh, I like that, or, ooh, is that gonna complicate what I want to do on my property? They can actually see what the change is on the page. And that might give you additional direction on, well, now that we've got some text on the page, we've got community reacting to it. Yes, we wanna go forward with this provision, no, we don't wanna go forward with that one, we need to change this third one. That's probably the best avenue to digest the public input and get it to a final result.
Well, where do we exactly, cause whenever I originally seen it, I was mainly stressing on the ag family exemption.
Yep.
And I understand it's kinda had to take on mind of its own, being interlinked with other stuff.
That's right.
But where do we exactly at this point stand with the family exemption on the ag?
Yeah, we can get through all of those provisions, that's what's next. And that's another, good point, you don't have to do all of these changes as one, lump ordinance. It doesn't have to be adopted that way. You could consider them individually, components at a time. If there is a priority like the family exemption and you want that to come forward ahead of time, we can push that out faster and then delay some of the other ones a little bit
Yeah,
behind.
'cause that, was the original biggest issue, because we had so many from ag to RUD,
Right.
Well, do you know, Counselor Atkins, that in the cover memo on the interim report, the staff did a good job of stating the clear number one priority for this project is to
Right.
revise this, so, we don't take that lightly. But that's where, again, your direction is important, and Jonathan made a good suggestion. If they're close enough in code writing or if you want to piecemeal this, chunk it, we can do that as well.
Well, 'cause I remember, 'cause even Andy, I remember whenever we were dealing, you remember with the trailers, Andy, and then they brought in, like we was talking on the shipping container part,
Mhm.
'cause, we did have questions there.
I think you've addressed that here too, Paige.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was looking at that, because, I think yours was concerning that even in RUD, if you had the acreage, you should be able, which I have no problem with that either. But, like I said, the original charge for me was because of what was happening because we do got a lot of smaller acreage that's in ag also.
The problem is that the family exemption, from what I can tell in reading this, the family exemption is so tied in with some of the other parts of the
Right.
ordinance. So once you change,
I
so
agree.
I think it all has to be together. I hate that
That
it's
is one of
slowed
the
down that much,
downsides,
but if we reduce the sizes on the parcels, then maybe some of the family exemption parts of it come out, or it makes it not even needed if we can get, the whole thing done.
Right, I agree.
Okay, I'm gonna throw out a date. Get moving on this thing. Okay, how about, April the 29th?
So is that the next P and Z meeting? Okay.
What do you think?
It gives us about 4 weeks. We can try, we are, losing a staff member that's a big part of this project. So we might not be able to hit that target with all the ordinance amendments, but we can bring you everything that we have at that next meeting, if that works for you. But I don't know that, sitting here now, I can commit that we'll have literally
Yeah,
the whole
yeah,
thing drafted
okay.
in 4 weeks.
Well, let's give it a shot, and then how are you gonna do the, public meetings? You wait until after we've gotten some feedback and,
Yeah, we probably build in, a buffer of about, probably until that first council meeting in May, so that you
Mhm.
guys have an opportunity to make a recommendation to the full council. They've got an opportunity to digest that and provide direction, and then from there, we'll either go back to the drawing board or work through some more meetings with y'all, or we can start, going out and having public meetings and showing some of what the proposed changes might be.
okay.
Okay. So, the first topic we'll talk about, because it's the biggest one, and then dive on through some of the more, smaller nuanced ones, is the zoning district. So, you saw these slides last time, but I did wanna highlight, here that preserving cultivation and prime agricultural soils for agriculturally oriented uses, protecting agricultural character, that's the purpose statement for AGC. And you'll see in some of the other slides, and based on some of the input that we received, maybe that's not the best purpose statement for AGC. It probably is better described as a hybrid of agricultural preservation and rural living. That's really more of what it is and what the expectation that we heard in the survey results are. AGC 1, very short purpose statement, really not much of a distinction between the two. Protect and preserve agricultural character, allowing for homes at very low densities and large lots. RUD, preserving areas, so you hear those same terminology, preserve, conserve, presently rural or agricultural in character and use. So even the purpose statement in RUD describes it as somewhat agricultural. RUD1, protect and preserve rural character, developing areas, supports limited growth where development pressure is increasing, but public water and sewer are not readily available. So those are the purpose statements. So there's, you can see AGCs, maybe not exactly how it's being used today primarily, and there's really not a distinction, a major one, between the four in terms of what the purpose is. So we saw some commentary that maybe we had too many zoning districts. So here are some potential options about what to do about that. Option 0, as we would call it, would be status quo. Keep all the districts as they are. Don't take out any existing ones. Don't combine any. Don't add any new ones. Just leave them as they are. That would be your option 0. Option 1, you could combine AGC with AGC1 into just a single AGC district. There's some sense that goes into that. And the same concept with both RUD and RUD1 in just a single RUD district. There are some complications with those, and we'll go over that. Option 2 would be to combine AGC1 with RUD1 and make that more of a rural estate district. Both of those districts are primarily designed to keep out manufactured homes, and their prime use, you'll see in another slide, is really residential. So that might be the better fit in terms of consolidation, if that's what you'd like to do. Option 3 would be to keep all of the existing districts and then add an additional district on top of that, which would be a rural estate type district. You know, that's not a fixed name if we could find anything that works, but that's just a placeholder that we're using. So that would be your in-between district between 1 and 5 acres for minimum lot size. So some of the big things to keep in mind for a possible combination is the overall uses that are allowed amongst the 4 districts. Lot sizes, obviously. Manufactured homes is the big one. And then the process to implement the change. So on the back end, as you're going through these, some of these are essentially going to be council-initiated rezoning if we do a combination of rezoning thousands and thousands of parcels at a time, which other jurisdictions do. It is possible, but there's kind of a big notification process involved that wouldn't be part of option number 3. So this I found to be the most informing table in the whole presentation. So our planning staff worked with GIS, and I identified where there is farming activity in the county, so pastures, timberland, crop cultivation on a property. Doesn't need to be the entire property. And so they found that about 15% of the parcels of AGC were actually being used for farming. Everything else, the other 85% is either vacant or just residential.
Or what?
Residential. So large lot residence.
And that's an AGC?
That's an AGC. So that tells you there's really a mismatch between the purpose of the district and how it's being used, right?
Right.
Same thing for AGC1, a little bit lower than that. 13% were being used for farms, vast majority either vacant or residential. And RUD, the disparity is even bigger. So as you've probably seen from the use table, there's really not a lot of daylight between any of the AGCs and RUD in terms of farming uses. So you can farm on RUD, you can keep animals on RUD. There's really not a difference there, but hardly anyone's doing that on an RUD property or those are clearly residential.
Hmm.
So here's a map of where those farms are, about what you would expect, right?
Wow.
But you can see, while there is a lot of green,
My house.
yeah,
Yeah.
the vast majority of the land out here is not a farm.
Yep, hunger pains will hit.
Well,
So part of this conversation then is the different uses that are allowed in the district, because if you're gonna combine them, the combined district would need to have some added to it that weren't in one of them, and some taken out that, previously were in another, that kind of consideration. So we've highlighted what those big discrepancies might be between some of the combination strategies. So here, this column is, these first two columns go back to that option one, which would be to combine the AGCs and then also to combine the RUDs. And then the third column is to combine ABC one and RUD one, what that use table would look like in theory. So, we have a case out here. Tommy, you've got some emails on this one. Assisted living is not currently an allowed use in AGC, so if you combine them, that would be an allowed use in a consolidated AGC district. Farmers markets, you can see they're not allowed in the ones currently, so if you combine them, they would be allowed in those combinations, and still be allowed. Or we would suggest that, you see it's not allowed here, but makes sense to have it allowed as conditional, since a lot of those properties are fairly large. And some people might be hobby farmers, things like that. Craft breweries and wineries, that's another big difference between ABC and RUD. So I don't know if you all have any strong opinions about whether or not breweries and wineries should or should not be allowed in RUD, but that's another thing to consider. Solar energy, I think that is squarely an AGC type of use. I don't think you would want to necessarily have that in RUD, but that's another thing that you need to consider.
Is that solar energy farms, or is that
Yes.
something different?
That's, yeah, solar energy farms, so just the big swaths of the panels on the ground soaking up energy. So those are the big differences. Now, the big bugaboo here is manufactured homes, because really the only major purpose for the ones is to exclude manufactured homes. And a lot of communities were built in either of those two districts for that express purpose. They just wanted to build a residential community, they don't want any manufactured homes. So that's why doing option two, or option one rather, where you might combine the AGCs and then also combine the RUDs, that gets complicated because you have a whole bunch of AGC ones and RUD one properties out there that don't currently allow manufactured homes that would. So you'd have communities out there that they develop, try to keep them out, and then you combine the districts, they would be allowed. That wouldn't be the case if you combine the AGC one and RUD one districts. So you could keep the manufactured homes out of those developments that anticipated not having them. But some jurisdictions handle manufactured homes differently. Some, doesn't matter what the zoning district is, it's allowed in any rural type of setting. And others are zoning districts in other jurisdictions, they specifically have a zoning district that has manufactured homes, and that's all that's allowed in. So they can control specifically where they go. So it's
A lot of the pre-manufactured homes are being way better built than a lot of these houses they throwing up now.
they're not cheap anymore either.
No,
they're not.
The only way to get a cheap one is to get a used one. That's really it.
Yeah.
So those are the major considerations on the use districts. Just keep that in mind. And we have on here also the rural commercial and rural industrial. We didn't get a lot of feedback that those aren't working or that they're problematic, but these are, the rural commercials really meant to serve those crossroads and rural settings where there's not water and sewer available, but they are at the intersection of major roads. But you wouldn't necessarily wanna have a general commercial there because you might have a used character of a rural crossroads city. Same type of principle for rural industrial, a little bit smaller scale, outside of the USB also. So the other thing to consider with the districts is lot size. So as you know, AGCs, they're both 5 acres, the RUDs are both 1 acre. So, and I apologize for, I think you all have one printed from Karen, so maybe you don't have the same problem that I have. I inverted where I stapled it. But if you go through to page, it's gonna be page 15. You have a full table. And you can see where these different jurisdictions are falling. Hard pressed to find any of our comparison set. There's only one in here that had as big of a discrepancy between two districts as we have, between a 5 and a 1, and that was Union County, North Carolina. They have a 200,000 square foot minimum lot size, which is just about 4.5 acres, and then they have a 40,000 square foot, which is just under an acre. So a similar discrepancy between lot sizes there. Just about every other jurisdiction in our comparison set had either a cap at 1 or 2 acres, and that was the highest minimum lot size that they had. Example, Anderson County is 2 acres. Berkeley County was odd, they had a 15, and then a 2 was the next highest, right? So 15, 2, and 1. Other jurisdictions had just 1 acre. Lancaster County, their highest minimum lot size is 1 acre. So a lot of them fall in the 1 to 3-ish range, and then some have a purely agricultural district that might be residential in character also, that is something outside, something large, 15, 20 acres. So where do we want our maximum lot size to go? Is there something to be gained from having it at 5 acres? Do we lose anything by lowering that from 5 acres to something smaller than that for our county's maximum minimum lot size?
So the counties that you, did the comparisons on, are they, known for being, agricultural counties?
It is South Carolina, so just about every county has a good amount of agriculture, at least in terms of vacant lands. Now, they might not be doing a whole lot of farming for crop cultivation, but certainly there's a lot of animal uses that go on in those properties. So virtually all of these have some form of agriculture. And some of the...
As much as us?
Probably more. A lot of them have more.
Okay.
Yeah, we're on the shorter end of the stick in terms of counties. but-
Well, I know that at one time at the state, I was thinking, wasn't it, Carolyn, wasn't it deemed if you show more than it was actually kind of low, of $1,000
Worth of sale,
of
farm,
net
farm
sales,
sale,
you
yeah.
could be classified as,
For your
Agriculture.
taxes.
Taxes, yes.
there's a lot of 1 acre production produce farms.
Yeah. And the thing of it is it's a minimum. So anyone can always have thousands of acres, hundreds of acres, dozens of acres. And there's nothing that stops them from having a property that large. It's just, what is the smallest you want to allow in a certain area?
Well, let me take this opportunity to say on us that own acreage and have a lot of children, we don't necessarily, since we're still above ground, want to be pulling acreage that we're still working
Right.
to put our kids on at a particular time, even though the young'uns are going to receive it. You get what I'm saying?
Dude, yep.
And that's why you pick and choose where you want to Because, you know, just like in our situation, whenever they come out with the 6 split stuff, and I think you and Carolyn in 101 discussed it, you know, we were gonna end up having to do a subdivision,
Right.
you know. That's kinda devastating to a farm family to,
Carolyn and I were in 101 together.
yeah.
I
And you
remember that
remember,
conversation.
yeah.
I remember that conversation,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
But the biggest thing that we also, which I mean, doesn't just go for ag families, but any family that owns some acreages, is we got to remember that people don't work a lifetime to pay for stuff, to have everybody else telling them what they can, you get what I'm saying? Can and can't do,
Sure.
you know, there's a lot of issues like that nowadays.
Mhm.
So here's a decision point for y'all.
Mhm.
We think it makes a lot of sense, honestly, to reduce the lot size of, the minimum lot size in AGC down to 3 acres. We'll talk about the residential, subdivision of the 3 acre average thing, a little bit later on. That would solve that problem. That solves a lot of people's problems in terms of overall acreage and being able to have enough to subdivide and have residual stay in the district without rezoning. It would have eliminated a couple of rezoning applications that have come through already in the last couple of years. So it does check a lot of boxes. The other alternative there is to add a new district that would be in between the 5 and the 1, add a 3, add a 2, add a 2.5, something like that, to give folks an opportunity to go to a different district that's not gonna have the heartburn of a spot zoning between going to AGC and RUD in the middle of an ocean of RUD, that there's a little bit of a better transition there. So either one is a reasonable approach, so we're looking for your direction on whether or not you look for us to add a new district to the code, or you look to lower the lot size of AGC from 5 to 3.
My personal opinion, which, Tom, I think me and you had discussed it, I think one day whenever you was telling me about that you just couldn't believe how many different zonings we did have already. And which my intent, whenever I did this, was strictly for the AGC, you know. I don't wanna open up anything that's gonna give any more room to the trap builders to incite them
Right.
whatsoever.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
You get what I'm saying?
I do, yeah, that's the trade-off for all these things, right?
Yeah, it strictly was for the farm family and the family exemptions, but I can understand that it's gonna change other things. But, I mean, it's just like on the ag one and the RUD one. I understand the purpose of why at one time they wanted that,
Mhm.
but at the same time, we never thought $70,000 homes were gonna become $350,000 homes either. So a lot of these kids are gonna have to have, if their parents do got the availability to give them some land, they still stuck with the problem of not being able to afford a house.
That's right.
And it just blew my mind to see what even a single wide trailer costs now.
Go. What you thinking?
Oh, I got lots of thoughts. Do you wanna go through the whole presentation, or you wanna start, cause I got comments on everything from
Sure.
the beginning.
Well, so maybe it's helpful if we collect them as we go. I don't wanna lose track, and I don't want you to, lose track of anything you might have a thought on, or be able to bounce thoughts off of each other.
Right.
So do you want me to back up some slides, or?
I would go back to the, options, we have options 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, I can.
I was holding my comments for the end. Sure. So like this, I really believe in option one as a strong point. I just don't, there's not enough, there's like one item of difference between GC one and RUD one and the major portions. I'm like, just do away with the thing, make it easier on everybody. What I actually, and then you talk about doing these rural estates, I got a big one out here. I was thinking, let's just combine AGC and RUD because they're so close together, and then make a rural estate that's the transition between those two. Because if you look through the use table, there's almost no difference between a RUD and AGC that I can.
Other than a
Functionally.
Western farm exemption, man.
Well, if we make the.
You can get a farm
You
use
can
values
get a farm
in
exemption.
RUD.
Yeah.
And they both have right to farm protections linked to it as well.
So that's really my thoughts on all the different zoning districts we got. I mean, I was looking through some of the other ones that the other counties have. They have so many, well, you want a 1 acre, you gotta rezone to this. You want 2 acres, oh, you gotta rezone to this, you want this. It's just too much. I mean, personally, I think the simpler the better, will cover everything except for exceptions, and you just gotta deal with exceptions when exceptions come up. And that's where either special exceptions come in my opinion, or conditional uses or something like that, to try to cover things that may not fit exactly in the box.
So you would take option one and go a step further and say AGC, AGC one, RUD one is one district.
I would, but when you went to I think it was the next slide, I kind of backed off of that a little bit. Like you said, the notification for all of the rezonings, that was something I hadn't thought of until I saw that one page, and so I'm okay with just straight option one. If we were gonna do that, I would use the RUD as more of a rural estate, maybe transition between them, try to make them somewhat different.
So you would then have a firm stance on keeping manufactured homes out of a certain district.
No, I think manufactured homes should be in everything. That's just I'm not limiting people, I mean, rural, as we've discussed through all this and through the survey results, and AGC, again, they're almost identical, the look of everything is almost identical. I mean, if it's good enough for AGC, why not RUD? If you got, cause if it's a land, maybe, and so later in here I put in, maybe there's size considerations inside the zoning, I don't know if that's even allowed. But let's say you gotta have 2 acres to have a manufactured home. That way you're not putting it in a 1 acre subdivision, you know, you're still kind of doing, you're not creating a manufactured home park or something. But if you've got, let's say 10 acres in RUD, why can't you have a manufactured home there? Or 5 acres, no, I mean, you could put it out there, nobody would ever see it. And that's the kind of places where I'm going with it is, it's more of a size requirement than it is of anything else.
And we can't forget that everybody's pocketbook ain't the same size.
Or make it so that there is a hard cutoff, you can't have, cause this was at the very beginning of this project, I was thinking, maybe we should make AGC be 20 acres and greater, and have everything below it has to be RUD or something like that. That way you protect farms, but then allow other stuff to happen, and really protect things. There was a few counties around South Carolina that has something along those lines. It wasn't necessarily 20, you could like start at 15 acres and work your way up, and it's just, you can't have anything smaller than that. If you go smaller than that, it has to be rezoned. That way we keep the big parcels intact, that would be likely to be a larger commercial operation. I don't like that idea necessarily, but it is an idea.
Well, I mean, and then it's real troubling because, like we know with the state of things, we're back to the same issue, the older folks dying off and the kids.
The kids sell it off.
Or they could sell it off, but there's not many people that can buy a large tract of
No.
land.
It's that
So ultimately, I came back around to option one is the one that I think is the.
I
is
think
what
we need
I
to
would
look at
prefer.
the best way that we could preserve possibly. Because,
Well, I came up with a way to that, and ain't nobody gonna like it, which is absolute no subdivisions of any land. Family or not, nothing. And if that's the goal of us, is to protect farmland and never allow it to be anything else, you're gonna have to take somebody's rights away.
oh yeah, and that ain't good.
Aaron, do you have a job?
I would Well, I would agree to that, except for the fact that your little survey thing is eye-opening.
Yeah.
So, do y'all have,
AGC,
so on this slide, do y'all
15%.
have better,
that's terrible. Terrible.
Well,
I mean, but it's a fact, I guess, cause y'all,
yeah, but the bad thing is that's just here, but it's everywhere.
well, I know.
Cause I mean, we're talking about in the state of farming as the US as a whole, it's only, what was it, Carolyn, it was like 70% of less than 1% as a whole of our entire country. The majority of your food's coming from South America and Brazil now, as it is.
Well,
well,
I- probably, the combination, combining them, but then when you combine them, what are you talking about on acreage? You didn't put that up there.
Yeah, that's the other question. It's,
Yeah.
So, what,
I
and
don't know if
maybe
we
it's
ought to
easier
do that.
to boil it down
You
to
don't
what's the
think- you don't
largest
like-
minimum
No,
lot
I
size.
think we should keep our ag limited. Tom, would you tell them exactly what you told me not too long after you got here, the way y'all, when you noticed we had so much zoning, what was it you said, y'all went straight from ag to residential, commercial, industrial?
I'm trying to remember the conversation. Now, were we talking about agricultural districts or?
Well, you said just the zoning districts y'all had, it wasn't,
Oh, you mean like the number of them or the breadth of them?
y'all didn't have 25, it was just.
No, I mean, they tended to grow a little bit over time, but let me think. I think we had one ag district, it was an ag 5. Of course, you could do a lot of flexible things in it, like cottage industries, and we had a family exemption and such. And then when you get into residential, let's see, we had R6, R15, R25, that was the popular one, 40 and 80, so that's 5, 6. We had 3 commercial districts and 2 industrial districts, although we were really looking at a third one. And then we had a couple of overlay districts. And to my recollection, well, we did have PUDs, planned unit developments, whatever you wanna call them, but they were governed through zoning. We had 3 different levels of PUDs. One was more residential, 2 was mixed use, and 3 was sort of mixed business, you know, it could be office parks or stuff like that. So yeah, we didn't have quite as many, but you know, on the residential side, it was only recently when Hyundai came, that's when the demand was created to either utilize or get rezoning for smaller lot sizes, because we were getting into the sewer business. So, yeah, and zoning started in 1994 there. But you have a little bit of a different dynamic here because, of course, this doesn't affect the rural end of the county. I mean, you've got a pretty big urban cluster you know, in the Rock Hill and, Fort Mill area, and Lake Wiley is starting to emerge. And York is even growing, and Clover. So, you know, the smaller cities are beginning to emerge. But you guys had something that we didn't, that I wish we had, in our comprehensive plan, and that was an urban service boundary. We had, I explained to Jonathan one time, we had a form of it. They were called character areas. And, when you get out, that there was these rings outside of the cities, particularly Statesboro and the smaller cities, but that could kind of be an urban growth boundary too. So, but the long story short is, we didn't have quite as many, but, we really only had one rural zone, and, we tried to keep it flexible. But there really weren't a lot of people who wanted to do rezonings in, of any kind in the Ag 5 area, because we had what we needed, either as a use permitted by right or conditional uses or whatever. It just worked for us. So it was sort of a special circumstance, but, we didn't have to do a lot of fixes.
And that says a lot though around here, which I think you would agree, Andy, that you're finding that a lot of people now really don't wanna own that much. They, smaller lots.
Let me just say, I was very aggravated, Saturday doing landscaping, and I was going, man, I wish I had a townhouse. Townhouse with a garage, I was really contemplating it as I was putting out all those bales of pine straw, so.
Mhm.
Well, if you're looking at, I'm thinking, and I'm just trying to get my thoughts around this. I think we should get rid of the AGC 1 and the RUD 1. I don't see a purpose in that. If we got rid of that, and then I see your point on combining, but I'm a little nervous on that. So what if we kept the RGC, what if we kept the RUD, and I'm kinda going along with Greenville County on this one, made like the RUD would be 1, the AGC would be 3, and then have the estate, real estate, is the 5 acres.
I didn't come up with any reason to have the rural estate.
Other than, I don't know, somebody who has a large piece of land maybe, or even make it 20 acres. If they have,
But what are they getting out of that that's not part of AGC?
I don't know, I don't know.
That was the reason
For
I-
me, it's nothing, I mean, it would be nothing for me, but I'm trying to think these families.
Right, and that's.
That have had this in their families for years and years and years, are they gonna feel like we have, snubbed our nose at them? Or we just don't care about them, or, you know, I mean, we have a in our strategic plan, we care about AGC. We have even a committee that is looking at preserving AGC. Although your statistics, I think the full council's eyes would really be opened with those statistics right there. Cause I mean, I'm still flabbergasted about that, but anyway, I mean, that's just kind of what I was thinking, but.
I presume we have the ability to, put an, acreage metric with those figures? Is that possible?
In terms of overall,
Yeah, can you drill down a little bit more?
it wouldn't
on
be
that?
anything better than an estimation, because, we'd have to estimate what portion of the property is encumbered by farming activities certainly try to, if we assumed that, you know, all of the properties that are identified with farming land uses are using the entire thing, then that would be a relatively simple exercise to do acreage.
Well, we had during maybe the story, we had one where we had AGC and it said how many acres were in AGC total.
Right.
So you could do a thing like
Yeah.
that and then take,
Yeah, as long as we assumed that, you know, all those
Yeah.
parcels that had farms were using the whole thing, yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be easy. But,
See, Or, I mean, even to me, you know, it doesn't even have to demonstrate that they're farming, just knowing the aggregate figures
oh, yeah, we
for each zone.
Yep.
I mean, that would, I think it'd enable all of us to, you know, put everything into context.
but, I mean, from an acreage standpoint, for me, as long as we're keeping the larger stuff in the AGC, RUD is still allows just a little bit more. I mean, I just don't wanna do away with it, so we don't have to do 15,000 notices.
Hmm.
That's the only reason I'm trying to avoid it.
What do you think?
Be fine, that was some of that.
Well, besides that, what do you think?
I mean, I'll be
With
fine with the three. My biggest thing is which I was hoping that it would evolve around, which I know I'm learning. Law-wise, you can't apply it to one but not the other, right? Is that correct?
You have to see when apply what.
When we get there, you'll know.
Yeah, when we get there, we'll know. Well, it's a big difference between the ag family
Yes.
and then what a lot of the developers would.
Yes, you
want
can
to-
define that legislatively,
Yeah,
so that
on-
it's
on the
narrowly
ag
tailored
land.
to certain conditions, yes, sir.
Yeah.
I mean, because that was the other thing that troubled me about all the rezonings. Every time you turn around, rezoning RUD out in the middle of all this ag land,
Yeah.
maybe it didn't bother anything, but you did just set a precedence of
You
putting
did,
RUD
yes.
out in the middle of agriculture land, so the next thing you know, the one right beside them,
And
and you
then it's like
started
Pac-Man.
it.
So,
You're eating up your ag.
well, that was, in a big picture, I mean, really big picture, once we get this sorted out and we get the districts, whereas we can have the smaller acreage in the zonings, you could go back and possibly do a council-initiated rezoning and pick out the little pixels that are spread all through and try to fix them so that you can claim a larger uniformity to it. That's really big picture idea, but, that's one way to try to take care of that, that way you don't get the zoning creep. But first, we gotta fix the zonings to get them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, would you say though, Jonathan, I mean, you've been here a lot longer than me, well, any of us up here, in a year's time, have most of the zonings been basically ag RUD?
That is, the most common rezoning application that we have is AGC to RUD for one or two parcels, yeah.
So I think we can fix that really quick here. Maybe the next slide.
Well, I'm just gonna say this. Taking RUD to 1 acre makes me a little nervous. I know, but I'm just saying that for the future. Because we do this, because we do AGC and RUD. And then what do you get on that? You're gonna get a lot of development continuously in ag. You know, like that one little piece that we have rezoned to, and I think that that's something that everybody has a little issue with that. And worrisome, that it's gonna just multiply and gonna keep going. We're gonna keep getting more and more and more of your ag gone to RUD. It
Well,
sets a
that's what-
precedence.
That's what Michael was saying though, but if we did specify it to some type of, family exemption.
Yeah, they're distinct things, and so
Yeah.
the family exemption, we'll get to that in a little bit, but you can tailor that very, very specifically, cause that's about
Okay.
subdivision, it's not really
Yeah.
about zoning district.
Okay,
And actually, which I mean, I don't know how y'all would feel about, but that's just like Andy brought up about the 20 acre. Maybe not necessarily 20, it'd be nice to be 20, but say 15, if you had in there, I think some places actually had what a homesteader exemption zoning type with a large acre parsonage.
That'd be a family compound.
Yeah. But that's getting
Um,
technical.
I saw those in, there's a district that has those, I saw in your,
I think so, there's one example in there, yeah.
but again, that would be, the only question I would have is, what does that accomplish that we can't already accomplish with AGC?
Well, that's true too.
So I think I'm hearing there's consensus on, consolidating some of the districts. Do we have a consensus on the approach?
okay, option one, you put the AGC and AGC one.
Yeah,
RUD one, into one.
And just leave it
Yeah,
like that?
just, yeah.
Okay, and then, do we want just the two, or do you want to bring in a third?
I'd say,
I don't want a third.
you know,
I don't know of anything that, again, it's, what are we gonna get out of it that we can't get out of the other two?
If you go that way, you can build in whatever, distinctions aren't there that you're looking for. You can build them into the consolidated AGC versus RUD.
I mean, really, if we wanna make, if we were gonna do this from the beginning, RUD and AGC would be further apart in uses and everything, but that would just make a bunch of people that are in RUD mad.
Okay. What do you think?
yeah, that'd be fine.
Are you good with that?
Alright, so we like option
Cause I
one.
mean, it'll accomplish what we, well, or what I see in the family exemption kind of.
Okay, so, that's helpful, and so the next step would be, are there any uses that, pop out as a concern if we were to take that approach and consolidate the ABCs and then also consolidate the RUDs? And this is gonna be the helpful handout, the use table with the green color that's got the red boxes on it. So, you could consider the two columns that say ABC with an asterisk and the RUD with an asterisk, and that would be essentially what we would input as the use table, entries for the consolidated districts. So if there's something that you think that needs to be added or should be removed, now's the time to let us know. So again, the big difference was the manufactured housing. So Andy expressed he was comfortable with that. We have consensus that we're comfortable with allowing manufactured homes in the consolidated districts.
Was it Josh who put this together? Josh?
Reinhardt,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good tool.
Okay, so the manufactured homes, would be conditional.
Would be conditional or would be permitted?
Yeah, they're permitted, but they have just underpinning and basic requirements.
Okay.
I think that one thing, I would wanna hear from the public.
You
on
will.
that.
One way or the other,
I
you'll definitely.
really do,
You're gonna have a lot of
because I
people
have
that
some
will say, yeah,
feelings,
I'd love to put.
and
more property
obviously-
in that, yeah.
You have some feelings and you have some feelings, but I wanna hear what the public's
Mhm.
gonna say.
Well, if they took your golf course, we don't need.
Do you want the, townhouse on your golf course? Well, some, I can't,
No,
do not answer this.
We already got 'em.
I know you loved your golf course, and that's why I try to use it as my
Well,
example.
yeah, if you'd have paid the money we paid, you'd love it
Oh,
too,
I know.
and be upset.
I'd
Okay.
be very upset.
So are we okay with assisted living being added to AGC as a special exception?
Yeah, I don't know, I think it's fine. You know, there are places that can use it for health reasons and whatever.
And would we be fine with allowing, farmers markets as, permitted in the consolidated AGC, not currently allowed in AGC one, and as conditional in RUD?
Why aren't they just permitted in RUD?
Because those are smaller lots typically, and rather than just a produce stand, this is much more substantial. So this is your, Fort Mill's got a farmer's market, that I go to quite frequently. There are others, they're more substantial, so there's gonna be a lot of parking, there's gonna be a lot of trips that aren't necessarily suited to just being by right. But, you know, there's a world in which you can make them permissible.
I guess that's why conditional is
That's right.
allowable
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Well, with that being said, we do have a lot of small AGC parcels
Mm-hmm.
that would just be allowed to have a farmer's market
And they would
without
be-
condition.
And they would be today, except for what are currently AGC one, I guess that's what you're referring to.
Right, but I'm saying, but your AGC, you know, if you have a 1 acre AGC or a 1 acre RUD, one's conditional, one's not.
What's the difference, right?
Yeah, I get hung up on there's no difference
Yeah,
in, really between the two, other than 1 acre and 3 acre.
yeah, and, as Tom's pointed out a few times, you're never gonna get a perfect
Yeah.
code, and the
All right.
existing lots are gonna create the problem. So ones that are already substandard lots, they should be larger, so they're making it more complicated.
I'm good with it. Do y'all, here's one I did circle in my notes, the hunting, fishing, and landscape supply that are permitted in AGC, should they be conditional in RUD? Again, it gets back to there's a lot of large lot RUDs that just ended up being huge for whatever reason. Is that a problem? What we're talking about is this.
I know,
Okay.
I know.
I mean, how,
Hunting and fishing.
okay, I joined a hunting club in Georgia. Sometimes you can encumber being around some real characters. Are these kind of clubs something you'd want in an RUD? I mean,
Well, I think about properties like Tommy has. Tommy's RUD. If he wanted
Okay.
a hunting fishing club on his land,
alright,
right now, there's no reason, but for all intents and purposes, it's an AGC land,
yeah,
other than a arbitrary, no, I mean, it's somewhat arbitrary.
and what's the minimum lot size in RUD?
One night.
Well, not gonna have a lot of clubbing on an acre, are you?
Not much to hunt on the acre.
Yeah.
Well,
But then we ain't got dairy farm on which 1 acre. Somehow or another, we ended up in RUD, and nobody's ever been able to tell us how we ever went from agriculture to RUD, but we did, so.
You could make those special exceptions.
Sure.
yeah,
And
that's
add
what I'm.
Yeah,
conditions
that
about
sounds good.
acreage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For both of those, hunting and fishing clubs and landscape supply?
And I don't know what the real difference between special exception and conditional
well,
is.
landscape supply could be really devastating to some communities, because you're talking trucks and all kinds of stuff there.
Well, here, let me explain the difference between conditional and special exception, and maybe that'll help with the
Okay.
community impact. So, conditional use, means that they would just submit something, administratively, we review it, if they meet the conditions, check, they're done. Special exception goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals, so, it's a meeting by the citizen board, they get to decide it, and it is a public hearing, so,
Okay.
it doesn't get posted, people get an opportunity to come out
Yeah.
and speak their piece and whether they support it or oppose it.
Okay,
So it's a good compromise when you can't make a firm decision about whether it should be
Exactly.
allowed or
Yeah.
not, let the board decide, or
Yeah.
let the community has to.
Yeah.
Well, here's the
I'll
other
go with
thing,
that.
a landscape supply is the only other place it's allowed, I believe, you can correct me, is in the industrial, correct?
I think it's allowed in GC. We
I
don't
would
get it-
remember reading it over and over and over for
Yeah.
the dredging one, and
We don't get it very often, but.
so that's why I remember that. So unless you want
I
somebody
want
to,
special exception,
okay.
I think, because I just don't wanna get a community in a situation that we're gonna get hammered.
So how do we,
Poison doors, so.
so are we good with keeping the distinction between ADC and RUD on the breweries and wineries?
So why would they not be allowed in RUD?
Same principle about the landscape supply.
Can we make them special exceptions?
Sure could.
Yeah.
Well, I might convert our milk barn into one.
Again, I'm having a hard time deciding the
Well,
difference
make it like
between
it.
these two at
Right.
all, and if
Right.
it's good enough for this.
It sure
That's where I
sell better
struggle.
than milk,
Yeah,
I'm
and your
sure.
original thought that maybe there's really only room for one district here is a valid one. It's just, it's a bigger lift. You're right about that.
Yeah, I really, when you said, talk about the notifications, that just threw it off completely. I forget that, that's not.
Okay.
How do we already talked about manufactured homes.
I had the same comment on solar facilities.
All right, now, Jonathan, why are you skipping over this event venue stuff here now? That gonna skip
Where's
over that
where?
contentiousness?
Well, is that?
Well, I mean, I would like to have
a state thing?
racetracks
Isn't that a
and.
state issue?
Yeah, they wouldn't
Yes.
change if you consolidated the district, that's why. They're conditional in all four of those districts.
Oh, we can have kindergarten.
Okay, so.
And then the
just
last one,
solar.
yeah, did you want to have
I mean,
solar
really, what
energy
about
as
have
a
pushing
condition?
racetracks?
Yeah, I see it. I was aggravated here.
Did y'all want a special exception for the solar energy
Yes.
facilities also?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And only because it's large pieces of property out there, trying to get it, go through the rezoning to AGC to put a solar farm on it.
It burns the corn up.
How could you, can you plant, you can plant shorter plants between it, that wouldn't burn it up, right?
Alright, that's very helpful.
That, actually, you listen to that, I read some articles about that,
Oh,
they
did you
were
read it?
complaining.
And well, and then you, so you plant between them, then when you got your wiring going on, it washes the solar panels down so that they continue to work properly. There's a lot of good that comes out of that, anyway.
Alright, so I think we're good on consolidation, we're good on uses, so now the question is, what's the maximum lot size for the consolidated AGC? Is it 5, is it 3, is it something else?
A collective sigh.
The consolidation on which one, the AGC?
Yeah, we can put a pin on that one, cause I think there's another provision, that speaks to the minimum lot size, that maybe we can cover that and then come back to.
3 for family, 5 for anybody else.
We'll all become family real quick, I promise.
So,
For sure.
so this has been, and this is the very next slide, so, this has been referenced, in council a couple of times, by 2 council members, so there used to be a provision in the code where you could do what was, literally a defined use in the code, residential subdivision development. And we've looked through every code in this class and some others, we couldn't find any other jurisdiction that held that as a separate use, outside of single-family residential. But what it did was allowed folks to build, specifically in AGC, lots as small as 1 acre, if you had an overall 3-acre average, where the base district is 5 acres. So basically that allowed developers to have smaller lot sizes than your John Q homeowner that owned property in AGC. They had to have a larger one. So council took that out in 2019. There's been some discussion on council on whether or not to reintroduce that. So here's an example of what that looks like. So this is Flying Eagle Estates. You all dealt with a rezoning. I think this might have predated you, Andy. I'm pretty confident about that. But there was this proposed rezoning that went from AGC to RUD right here,
Yeah.
where you can see everything around it is AGC, right? But that included this subdivision, Flying Eagles Estates, and just looking at the aerial, it really doesn't look like an AGC development, right? It looks much more akin to what you might find in RUD and some other districts. I think this is RSF 30. So there's smaller lots in this AGC development than there are in this RSF 30 development. So it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So as I mentioned, we looked through all these other codes that no one else did it that way, the old code provision. But what a lot of people did do is similar to what the county does now, in the form of either a conservation subdivision or a cluster subdivision. Those terms are somewhat interchangeable, and people construct them different ways. But the basic concept is you get a smaller lot size than is otherwise allowed in the zoning district in exchange for a much higher percentage of open space than is otherwise required in that zoning district. That's the basic trade-off. In York County, our trade-off is normally it's a 20% open space for residential. In a cluster subdivision, it's 50%, so much higher percentage for your open space, and you can get much smaller lots in exchange for that. So that's how most folks do that. So if there is some comfort on council with reintroducing this 3-acre average concept, then there probably is comfort with having a 3-acre average without having to reintroduce this complex, unique subdivision type. So if there is interest in reintroducing the ability for developers to have new communities at a 3-acre lot average, it would make sense and be much simpler. Because part of the goal in the strategic plan is to have code amendments that make the code simpler, would just to be to have a 3-acre lot minimum in AGC. Correct.
So I don't, what would be the complex residential subdivision type? Am I mixing that?
So yeah, so it's a little confusing, and so this title here, residential subdivision development, that was a use type. So it was different than single family residential. So if I owned an AGC property and I want to do a minor subdivision, I've got to have 5 acres for all my lots. But if a developer buys 200 acres, they can come in and use this terminology, or they could back in before 2019, and they could have as many lots as they could fit, as long as the average lot size was 3 acres. And they could go as small as 1 acre, and they could have balance it on the other end with a couple that were 20 or 25. So you have a couple of big lots and then a bunch of tiny ones in AGC. That was the trade-off.
Okay, and so then the recommendation is not
to reintroduce that, but you could instead, if you wanted to have a 3-acre lot average, it would be a lot simpler and make a lot more sense and be more equitable for the folks that aren't developing for profit. They're just subdividing for families or whoever else, or smaller scale profit, right? To have everyone have the same playing field of, I need to have at least 3 acres.
And ultimately, you would end up with less houses than if they rezoned and did RUD, right?
That's right. Right, so that's the trade-off. There's some thought to reintroduce this concept of a 3-acre average, which loosens up the ability to have some more houses in AGC than you can today, but not so much so that you're going to a 1-acre average, a 1-acre lot through rezoning, right?
Here is my thoughts on this. How do you get an estate style subdivision?
20
'Cause-
acres.
I can't afford 20 acres, so. Cause the thing is, so in AGC, we want no HOAs, which means we really want the open space to be included in the lot, so there's nothing for the HOA to have to pay for. And then you want it to be large enough that they're, so the cluster here's why the cluster works out, is that your infrastructure is a lot less. And you just have all this green space, so they only have to build a road that's a half mile long instead of 3 miles long. But then they have to have an HOA to own all the open space, which nobody really gets to use, so they're just living in a little small lot in the middle of AGC. Which ruins kinda the AGC in general, cause the open space then becomes deed restricted, and you can't do anything with it. So, at least with the larger lots, you could have a little bit of farming and not nearly as many property restrictions. But if we do,
So one thing with, AGC and the cluster subdivision is that DES does not allow for community septic. So you would have to fit you'd have to have well and septic on each lot, so it'd be a 1 acre lot, pretty much. But you'd still have to meet all the other requirements, and you'd have the large pieces of open space. Nobody's going for that. It's too expensive. And the other thing that is really, clusters are designed for like really marginal pieces of land where you only have like a little bit of buildable area. And AGC, we haven't gotten there yet. So, I haven't had any in AGC. I've had a couple people ask and then find out they can't do community septic and they're gone.
yeah.
So,
How does DHS define community septic?
anything where they share a septic system, 2 homes share a septic system. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so would that be, calling on Andy's experience, would that be distinguished from like a package system or decentralized sewer system?
Yeah.
So if somebody came in with a cluster subdivision, could they use a decentralized system or a package system?
No. Everything has to be on the same lot it serves.
Yep, or public.
Really?
And the reason being, all these places, their septic systems are failing, and then nobody can afford to take them over. And so then the state is having to give all sorts of money to counties or municipalities to go in there and take these lagoons out or these other systems out and run
Yeah.
back to their system.
So, which can happen with the package systems too,
Yeah.
if they're privately, unless, and I don't know if you do a trust indenture, does that sound right?
Perhaps.
Well, you've been injured, all right. Yeah, the state just said, this is too complex, they've got too many of them out there, abandoned.
Okay,
It's just not worth it.
so they drew their line in the sand, no
They
pun
did.
intended, yeah, okay, interesting.
Okay, go back and explain on the why, within the AGC and RUD, allowing the creation of a 1 acre lot size within the AGC. So if in AGC, they have to have septic,
So if, I was speaking just for cluster subdivisions, cause you have that bonus lot size, but you can get smaller. In AUC, minimum lot size 5 acres, they say you can do, what I'm drawing on right now is 14.5, I don't think that's AGC, that's RUD. But they see that tiny little lot size and they get excited, the developers do. But when they start doing the math, they realize you have to have utilities in order to get it. So they're gonna have a 1 acre minimum lot size.
so
no matter
all
what.
of this that's, this community right here.
It wouldn't meet the standard for cluster. Cluster also has other requirements, you can only have 15 homes together in a spot, you have big distances between
Yeah,
little
okay.
clusters.
Yeah, so it's the same type of approach in that you're allowing smaller lot size than is otherwise normally allowed. The cluster is the open space trade-off, there's no trade-off in the old loop home, they just get smaller lots. So these are about 1 acre here, so for comparison, I think these are all 5 acre lots, is that right? Yeah, so these are all 5 acre lots, and so these are in between one, and you can see they even left some of these,
How did that
larger
get
lots here.
in AGC?
Through the loophole that used to be in there that council got rid of in 2019.
Oh, okay, cause I'm just like, well, how did this happen?
Right. But, cause you can see intrinsically, it just doesn't make sense, right? Why are we having
No, not
RUD
in
style
AGC.
lots without having the RUD district designation?
Yeah.
Right. Or there'd be some other
No
trade-off.
higher density than.
I say we just do away with residential, don't even. No, I don't even mess with it. Y'all good with that? Look, I'm anti-development.
Anti-development.
It should go away.
Sound good. We'll go-kart track, take
So
it.
that, now that we've had that conversation, that brings us back to, lot size for AGC. Oops, I'm going the wrong way.
Okay, so if we've had more rezonings that were AGC that they wanted to go to RUD, even if we put AGC at 3 acres, that's still not really gonna solve the problem.
It'll solve, it's gonna be a case by case basis, so it'll solve some
But
of
there
those
are
problems.
more that they just wanna go to 1 acre.
Yeah, and I think, a good portion of that might be solved by the family exemptions.
Family
The one-
exemption.
The family exemption that
Oh,
we'll,
yeah.
that we'll get to.
I think leave it. I didn't used to, until about 45 minutes ago, I didn't want to, but I'd leave it 5 acres.
I wanna leave it 5 acres.
And we deal with the rest of it in the,
For one thing, why have
Family
AGC?
exemption. Leave the rest of it with family exemption.
Well, now we're gonna get to family.
Yeah,
well,
so-
it's not gonna be
Now
called
we're
family
gonna get to
exemption.
that
family.
too.
Yeah.
Let's
So-
get to
Are we solving problems or are we causing more problems?
And
Well, there
shocking-
lies the rub.
Well, that's how
Here's the
zoning
shocking
works, right?
part
I know.
is that we're sort of agreeing on things.
Yeah.
This is the shocking part.
Really?
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Now, I don't
Family
wanna cause
exemption.
nothing that
Go to
causes
family.
more houses.
Go to family exception. Let's get that.
Well, before we go there, I just wanna say from some of the survey results we got, we asked people what their top 5 concerns were. Amongst the biggest risers in those, that you might have spotted in there was spot zoning. So people concerned about spot zoning.
Yeah.
So the big, gap between 5 and 1 is what's causing some of the spot zoning concerns,
Yeah.
I think. Cause people feel like, well, if we as council rezone this property here, because we like this person's application, it makes sense in this context. But we don't want everyone else around them to go to 1 acre lots in RUD.
Right.
Cause that's gonna inform the case to be made by the applicants, down the road, literally time-wise and, on the segment of road. But, so that's the other thing of it. So if we're not as concerned about, the gap causing those spot zoning problems, and maybe the vast majority of the rezonings that have come before you all that have been controversial, going from AGC to RUD, can be taken care of in family exemptions. I won't say, I'll say it's not gonna solve all of them, because we had a couple of, guy wanted to sell a couple lots
I
here and there.
remember.
We've had a couple of
I
those.
probably
People are
remember
looking to
all
sell
of them.
off a couple of lots, and that's not gonna help with the family exemption.
Yeah.
They still have to make those tough choices about do we spot zone, do we not spot zone.
Well, I think we can get those covered in the family exemption is what I'm hoping for when we get into it. That we can make a way for a guy that wants to sell 2 lots be allowed.
Well,
I got spots on me.
Now,
we have to call, we have to call
because
that
it's not-
something else.
Yeah.
It's not rezoning, we're getting there.
Well, make that one the estate. The estate.
Well, I don't wanna rezone it at all, but.
Okay, so family.
Okay, I'll turn this one over to Mary.
Alright, family exemption. So it provides the ability of property owners to subdivide their land, traditionally in agricultural aspects to allow family members to stay and
Mhm.
control of the land. And most of our family exemption division requirements are reactive. Some of them have been added along the way. specifically in 2019, a lot of changes were made. Probably at the same time as closing that 3-acre loophole, they also closed a lot of loopholes developers have been abusing to skirt the rules, which is why I get nervous when you talk about subdividing off for sale. So go through the comparison table. There are, some people don't have a family exemption. I thought it was interesting, Lancaster and Chester County do not have a family exemption, but they have a smaller lot size minimum, Lancaster in particular.
Lancaster's just one,
One.
so they would need
Yeah.
one.
So a lot of them have like curbs on it. They don't want you to be able to subdivide. It was, and Berkeley County was interesting. Berkeley County is an interesting case subject anyway. They have a lot of very strange things that have gone through there with history. A lot of the old plantations have their own zoning designations. It's, the more I got into the code, the more confused I got. So it was one of those things I had to start over. So a lot of them were, Berkeley requires streets. Chester County, actually, if you're doing a subdivision, they want a street put in. It can be a little short one, but they want a street. So it's interesting how the different counties and municipalities have approached family exemption, because it has gotten to be a problem in some of the areas that are much more densely populated. And so I went through and did a couple of these, found some examples. This is J.W. Wilson Road, which is over here, kind of southeast here of Fort Mill. And here you can see in 1986, Mr. Wilson divided up his land into 9 lots. Over time that changed. So now it's 39 lots. People were dividing it off, giving an acre to each child, that kind of thing. So you have 39 lots, and then I outlined in blue the ones that have been sold outside the family, so they're not staying in the family. And then a lot of the issues we end up with these kind of things is J.W. Wilson is interesting. It starts off at the intersection as Fort Mill, becomes county, and then becomes private. There are signs everywhere out there now since I've been here, because there have been so many fights over the road. Who controls it, if it's allowed to be legal frontage, that kind of thing. We now have a developer who bought the large pieces to the south there and did a shared access easement, 6 lots off of, 6 at least 5 acre lots off of shared access. He was supposed to come off Canyon Trail. And he found a loophole, got an easement, and put it in his own road across neighboring properties. So, that kind of thing. There's abuse everywhere on this kind of thing.
And as you can see, a lot of those parcels are landlocked, so
Oh, yeah.
you can immediately see, oh, the property access, a little dubious here.
Yes.
And once if it stays in your family, that might be okay until, have some
Follow
barbecues
up
that go
Thanksgiving.
wrong, right? But once it goes into private property owners outside of your family, now we're getting litigious and we're fighting
Yes.
over access.
Yes.
TikTok is full of those.
That's right.
Yes.
Somehow I ended up on the surveyor TikTok.
So some of our planners like to call these the long fuse issues. They're gonna
Yes.
work for now, but they're eventually gonna blow up.
And then you'll have somebody who's inherited land, doesn't want to live there, wants to subdivide it off and sell it, which is what happened on the north side there. I'm way too familiar with this road.
Better call Saul.
And this one is Cato Road. This one is over, I believe it is north of it's kind of north of 557 area. 11 lots in 1991 when the family divided up the property. Oops, you can play with my picture a little bit there.
Yeah, the aspect ratio
Yeah.
changed.
So, I have fun with PowerPoint with the images and everything. So, now there's 16 lots. It kind of got zoomed out a little bit there. 16 lots, also under RSF 40. 2 were sold outside the family. They're kind of at the end there. I get phone calls on this one all the time about people who inherited some of the bigger lots and they want to subdivide them. There's no access. There's none. It was divided before they even put in an easement. They just chopped it up. So we run into problems like that. Then we'll have little slivers of lots that aren't buildable. You cannot get anything on there. So you've inherited useless land. And they don't want to hear that you should probably buy some land from a cousin or something like that, because they don't talk specifically on this one. And then this one is, over here, just to the east of us, off of Springfield and I think it's Merritt, Parkway. The original property in, like 1969, 1991, he bought 3 large pieces of land. And now it is 8 lots, because they've been dividing off from family members. 3 have sold outside, and they're kind of in the middle of the parcel. The rest of the family wants to sell the rest of the land. You have 3 people in the middle of the parcel who have to be considered when it comes to developing the land. So we'll have people who wanna do townhomes in here. It's zoned RMX 10. They could do small lots. They can't do anything because you have those 3 people inside the family lots that are in the way, basically. They're not gonna sell. So, I have several more instances. They only gave me, Jonathan limited me. I made about 6 different instances where they just start dividing off the land and you don't end up with a large residual piece. There's one southeast of Rock Hill, Naughty Branch in Fields Farm. It was 6 lots in the, I wanna say late 60s, early 70s. It is now something like 30. And it's a mixture of people, and that one had a lot of tax sales, a lot of repossessions in there, so it's a mixture. And the reason I learned about all of these is when people start fighting, they call us and want us to do something. So,
Yeah, and that's all, just cautionary tale. We can
Yes.
craft the family exemption stuff. I think the
Yeah.
acreage is the easy part.
yeah,
It's the access and like how we make sure. it
Never can
justifies-
tell what's gonna happen.
That's
Right.
right.
So, may I ask,
mhm.
I think Mom calls them piano key lots, but is
Mhm.
that the same thing as a flag lot? Or is it,
No.
is this something new to, akin to York County?
So, piano key lot, as our council talks about it, is essentially having a whole bunch of mailboxes, driveways out on a county road. Right?
Oh, okay.
So that's the distinction between major and minor subdivision, is council got tired of seeing all those homes up on existing county roads, and then they added the threshold of 7. Once you hit 7 lots, you're major, and you need to build a road, make it internal, so we don't have all these mailboxes up and down the county.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And SCDOT was required people to share driveways after the fact. They wouldn't
Mhm.
issue enough encroachment permits.
Now I've also learned that there's more DOT roads than there are county
Yes.
roads.
Yes,
So-
there are.
All right.
Yeah, I talked to you about that.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So go through the current standards here for family exemption. The property to be divided must be a minimum of 10 acres prior to any division of the land for family exemption. So it must be located with the AGC and RUD, so it's gonna be a rural zoning district, hopefully agricultural in nature. The 10 acres is, again, an effort to keep from having basically like a little, it's like a squirrel's nest of some of these where it's just, they ended up being like little half acres, cause there was no standard, you could just deed off. So the 10 acres was an effort to kind of keep a larger piece of vacant, open land instead of having basically little family subdivisions where their septic systems are failing and it makes a mess. So the 10 acres was an attempt to regulate the density, and this was added in 2019. This was one of the more recent ones with the RUD and AGC. A lot of the older ones that I had examples of, all zoning designations. And then number 2, the grantor must have owned the property for a minimum of 20 years and can grant up to 2 exempted lots a year. This, the previously required ownership prior to 2002 was in the code, and it was to restrain the volume. We've had a couple where they divided off family land, family lots, and then sold the rest of the land to a developer who used the major minor subdivision before we had that and divided off the rest of it, and then also bought the family lots too. But these are all kind of things to kind of stop what had been happening. Conveyed by deed to from the grantor to a family member. We have it defined, very like limited family members. Again, that was another way people were just like gonna divide it off and give it to my cousin who turned around and sold it immediately. And it also prohibits family members from straw manning. Like you they use your name to divide off the land. And then, grantees that have previously received land from other family members or from other properties, are no longer allowed to receive additional lands. I'm not sure where this one came from, it's 2007. Obviously, somebody's feelings got hurt, and that's how this one came about. Lots created under family exemption shall be titled in the same name of the grantee for not less than 3 years. Again, that's one of those things trying to slow the roll on all the development and resale. And, so these are all like little loopholes that were obviously exploited. I don't have any examples of number 4. And then this one is Jonathan's slide. It is Build-A-Bear. So these are different ideas on how we can
Right, so
adjust.
I think, now that you have an understanding of how that provision is constructed currently, the family exemption, the thought here is to go through this, build an exemption exercise with you. How should we construct these things on these various decision points? So the first being, are we okay with it being exclusive to AGC and RUD like it is today, or would we like to introduce it to other districts?
Does it hurt if it's I mean, I don't know how many other districts have large lots that could even,
Yeah, there are some that have, and this is a common rezoning problem where the original zoning that was applied in '87 is not the one that should have been chosen at that time.
Mhm.
And people eventually have to rezone to a different district. We've had some examples where there's been RSF 30 or 40 in an area that was predominantly agricultural, and that was because they wanted to exclude manufactured homes, but there wasn't a district that did that quite yet. So things like that, but those are usually outliers. The vast majority of your residential districts are gonna be the smaller lots.
but if they exist, it would be better for them to rezone to a AGC RUD and then break off their piece.
Well, they can typically get smaller lot sizes anyway, because I don't know how far down you want to go in terms of lot size for a family exemption, but starting at RUD and then going there on down, they're all smaller than an acre already.
Okay.
So we
I'm
comfortable?
good with both,
No, I'm
with
good.
one.
Are you good? Number 1.
Okay.
Yeah,
Number 2, the parent parcel. So right now there's a minimum starting size of 10 acres and the residual size for all of them, all the resultant parcels have to meet the district minimum. So I think we've heard pretty succinctly, and that gets into number 3, that we'd like to go to as low as an acre, regardless of zoning district. So put that to the side for a moment. Do you want a minimum starting size before you can start giving your property away to a family member? And what's left over to the person that is granting the property, do they have to meet the district minimum, or could they also go below the district minimum? So if I've got 6 acres and I want to give 2 to a family member, can I do that, or am I limited to giving them 1 because I'm an ABC? 'Cause then it's going to start getting tricky, because if you don't have some limit on it, then I've got 10 acres and I start giving it to my family members, then I've got 10 1-acre lots eventually. Conceivably how you want to do it. So I think it's in your best interest to have, if it's not the district minimum, some sort of minimum residual size.
Does the,
Minimum starting size less important, I think.
does the administrative adjustment of 10%, would that apply in one of these?
Yep.
Then I would prefer to keep it at the district minimum. So if it's 5 acres, cause then it's plus or minus 10%, but if you wanted to go down and give them 1.5 acres and you ended up at 4.5, be good enough.
in other words, the owner of the bigger parcel would always have to keep the greater. How we do that?
Well, not necessarily. If they had, I guess, 10 acres, they can divide it equally.
That's when it starts, moving pieces move around.
Yeah.
So if if you have 20 acres and you give 10 acres to your son, well, now you both have the opportunity, unless there's a time limit on how long you've owned it, to further divide it down.
Well, that's where we're getting to the next one.
So it's
The
like,
time limits are gonna play a
yeah.
part of this.
So,
Yeah, it's a mess.
I think I heard consensus on the minimum residual. What do we think about the minimum starting size of 10 acres? Do we do away with that? Do we keep that?
Yeah, because we're not gonna have to, cause I mean, we've had a lot of them that have been 6 and 7 acres.
Yeah, I would say you gotta be able to do the split and stay above the district.
So residual
Keep it
instead of
simple. Yeah.
maximum.
Okay. All right, number 3, I think we already have consensus on that, but just double checking. The grantee receives minimum 1 acre regardless of district.
That's rough. I kinda don't want to, but.
I feel pretty confident that's what you're after, Tommy, but
I
I
know
don't know
it
about
is.
the rest.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean,
But that seems to be what everybody,
Right.
well, I don't know,
Regardless of
I mean,
district. That's the mortgage size.
And it really only affects AGC,
Yeah.
well,
because RUD is already 1 acre.
I was thinking bigger than 1 acre.
I mean, I'd love to say 3, but 3 might not always help us.
The most common request is 1, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to be comfortable with whatever the most common request
And
is.
what are, of course, we know probably RUD, but what else? What other zoning?
Yeah.
Have
So
you
this
had
would,
requests?
based on your feedback on number 1, it would
Just
be
AGC and
right?
RUD.
So really, all we're
Okay.
talking about is AGC.
Okay.
Yeah.
How small of a family exempted lot are you willing to accommodate in
Mhm.
AGC?
What would you say? Split it down and go 2?
Somebody's gonna be upset, I mean,
Oh, yeah, you ain't gonna make it, but.
That's how zoning works, you can never make everybody happy.
but you said the vast majority wanna go down to an acre.
They do.
Is that
The
fair?
vast majority is 1, did you say? 1?
Just
Did
do
I
one.
say, yeah, I'll say we keep that.
But now you gotta keep in the average
These are
person
fair.
has at least 2 kids.
It's
We ain't got
just-
there yet.
I mean, it's,
Yeah, but they won't give Johnny an acre and give Susie an acre.
but it's their land to give. That's what Tommy
That's what I'm
Atkins
getting
has
at.
said
That's what I'm getting
they
at.
want.
They won't give Johnny an acre and they won't give Susie an acre.
Yeah, I mean, if you put 2 in there, there's gonna be a
Well,
problem.
that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at.
That's what I say.
I mean, I come back on that. I come back on that. So,
That's it.
well, I mean, you know, I mean, no matter how you look at it, people buy their land and they work and they pay for it. And, man, I would like to people tell me what I can do with my land I didn't work and pay for.
That's what I'm getting at. That's what
1
you
acre.
said.
Yeah, 1
So,
acre.
1 acre.
Okay.
Thank you.
10 years.
Ooh.
Andy's ready. Yeah, so the provision used to be 2002, so eventually everyone would age out of that and no one could do a family exemption. So that was changed to 20 years, so what do we feel about the 20-year ownership?
Well, I came
Before
up
they
with,
can divide.
yeah, I came up with 10 years thinking, let's say I had,
A lot of things change in 10 years.
well, what if
Oh,
I've
yeah.
got, I've got a 5-year-old and I move out to a farm, finally decided that we move up, cause I didn't grow up on a farm, I finally had the money to buy one. I would like to allow, that gets you 10 years and a little bit, maybe,
Oh, you'd have a lot of catching up to do.
maybe I win the lottery. But then I can just buy more land, I don't even need to do that, but 10 years is what I think it should be 10 years. 20's a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, 20 a long time.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
So, how are you gonna be have, you wanna
chickens,
tell somebody you
them
just bought this
chickens would be
land.
dead by then, wouldn't they?
Yes.
That's right.
So if somebody calls me, they just bought the land 2 years ago and they wanna divide off an acre for their mama and their AGC. They've only owned the land for 2 years, so they can't use family exemption. That's the thing.
How often does that happen?
Most of the RUDs,
Really, they just bought them and then
Yep.
they wanna immediately do
Yep.
that?
And that's the decision point for council is how
I
much
see
do you wanna
that.
slow
Yeah.
roll it,
Yeah.
'Cause eventually,
Sorry, everybody watching, that's just too bad.
and a lot of it isn't for people to keep their kids on the farm, a lot of it are transplants.
You
who
just
come in.
keep driving nails and boards,
I-
don't you?
I do this all day, every day.
and 'cause some people, they buy into the
That's
country,
true.
they're like, I'm gonna have 5 acres, but when I'm ready to not mow as much grass, right, I'm gonna sell off a couple
This
acres.
is
Well,
like
I-
trying to find an electrical store.
I know.
I can see that happening though,
Chasing all
you
around.
moved in here, you're retired, and next thing you know, your family, your mom's,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Most people don't.
What's your input on that, Tom?
Beg your pardon, sir?
He's
Oh,
asleep.
he ain't
over there.
paying attention.
No, I'm paying attention, I just didn't hear what you
Accessory
said.
dwelling comes in.
I was gonna say.
What?
Yeah.
That's where the accessory
Yeah, Carol
dwelling
says
comes
that's
in.
where accessory dwelling comes
Yep.
in.
That's right.
Yep.
So
That's
number
very true.
5, I was thinking like one every 2 years. That was my way of slowing down, and that way developers or whoever, if you wanted to sell off lots, it ain't even gonna be a family member anymore. If you do one every 2 years, whatever.
Yeah, it goes slow.
And the old, process that is yet to be found historically, it was 3, it was capped at 3 cuts, period. It's not
Really?
out there for what it's worth.
Oh, no, I'm trying to something that put me on
So, so we're looking at two,
Where'd you get input on it?
yeah, so we're looking at 2 different caps, so, you know, one is about pace, how many do you wanna allow per year or per, you know, every other year, and the other is how many total. So right now, we have the 2 per year, we don't have a total. Our thought was if you make it 6, that aligns perfectly with our minor subdivision provision for the
Okay,
total.
so one every 2 years and 6 total,
Starting when?
after 10 years. So at 22 years, you can finally break the whole thing up. Is that right? Yeah.
Get time folk died on.
Well, that way, I mean, let's say you're retired, you own your land, and you need a little bit of money just to get on, instead of taking a reverse mortgage and having the whole thing gone, you can sell off a acre or 2.
That was 1 every 2 years.
Yeah, one every 2 years.
But then that wouldn't be a family exemption, cause it's not for family.
Well, that's why I'm saying, when I got to that point of it not being family exemption, you know. and
By that time, I'll
everybody-
be done fell down the steps.
and developers and everybody to have the same opportunity. If it's good enough for a family member, it's good enough for
You
Okay,
know,
well,
what other need done by then, huh?
My 5, on 5, is that what you normally see, is that like an average of, or is that why you put?
I think there's probably a reverse bell curve, a bell dip, or not bell, it's just, you know what I'm trying to
Inverted
say.
bell curve.
That's right, inverted bell curve, where you have a bunch of people that request 1 or 2, and then nobody requests stuff in the middle, and then people that wanna give it to, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 people.
Holy moly.
You know,
Yes, the family compound thing is not my favorite. I get that phone call at least once a week. Wow.
So what do you all think about Andy's suggestion of 1 every other year, 6 total exemptions?
6 total exemptions every 10 years. That doesn't make the math work, maybe 5.
No, you wouldn't be eligible until you owned it for 10 years.
Okay, got it, got it.
And
Do
then
that.
henceforth, have
Okay.
1 every other
So
year.
1 every
Turn it
other
back my
year.
head.
mhm.
Provided you never get below your minimum lot size for
Mhm.
your residual parcel.
That give you, you could have how many onions there, I see.
You can have
can have
6.
dozens.
And the
Big
alternative,
share house. house.
you know, there are gonna be
Yeah.
folks out there that want, you know, maybe they got a big family and they wanna do 10 and they wanna give some to aunts and uncles or.
Well,
Well, hey,
they're not allowed though.
at the
Right,
time-
right.
You look at it this way, the times we living in now, what's their option?
Yeah,
And that's becoming less and less frequent, but there might be some outliers, and in their case, they might well request a rezoning to RUD to be able to do that. Council could consider or not whether that was appropriate at that time.
Well, that,
I'm fine with that.
that's where items 6 through 9
Mhm.
play into that notion too. You can't, you know, do it in a vacuum.
Yeah,
Look at our definition of family.
Mhm.
immediate or extended.
And right now, we have immediate family, and
I
it's
would
working,
leave it,
it's
I'd
working,
leave it with immediate.
yeah.
Yeah, so since we're
We
talking
haven't had any
about it,
problems with that.
here's the current definition, so it's, mother, father, children, grandchildren, brothers, sisters, and stepchildren.
Mm-hmm.
So fairly straightforward. I don't think anyone wants York County to get in the business of asking for birth certificates and DNA tests and all that kind of stuff. We just wanna keep it simple.
Well,
Right.
Long lost Susie.
So, any concern about the current definition there? So then, number 6, skipped over it there, we do require a deed, with the access easement that's, shown on there. It has a easement agreement about who's maintaining it, who's responsible for what. We feel like that's very important to keep in there because otherwise,
It's
Yes.
working.
it becomes a swampy mess at the end.
Mhm.
That still doesn't help it, but at least makes it a little better.
That's
Yeah.
right. There are at least something on paper is how it
Yeah.
should work.
Right.
Number 8, currently limited to each grantee individual receiving 1 lot.
I would take that away.
I know.
Maybe I have a lot and they wanna grant me, maybe I want 2. I had it, they gave me an acre and I need 2 acres now. So they give me another acre.
Well, you could always combine those.
Mhm.
Um,
Recombination.
Well, right, so you have to do a recombination to get that, but it's still,
The only downside is if you don't do some form of recombination, they're only gonna live on the 1 lot, right? So what are we gonna do with the other one?
sell it.
Or you could just give them the 2 acres up front too.
You could, maybe it's a trial, I don't know. Do y'all wanna limit
And they
to
just
one
combine.
person?
Just limit it to 1.
I don't wanna limit it. Do you wanna limit it?
Limited to receiving 1 lot. Forever?
From that grantor parcel. Through the exemption. You could receive it through other governments, but this is specific to the exemption.
I don't know.
So you like, say if you had,
Do you wanna
like,
give
if you
one-
wanted to give Tucker and Roy the same parcel of land.
No.
Mhm.
So it'd be, you wanna give Tucker 1 parcel this year, and 2 years later you can give Tucker another parcel.
Or his mother-in-law.
No, mother-in-law don't count.
Well,
Yeah.
it would be in his name, but he could put his mother-in-law there.
Right. Which is where number 9 comes in, is to keep people from switching them,
Mm-hmm.
cause that's.
I
Oh,
don't know,
man.
I think
It's
to
gonna be
take,
his name.
I would take 8 out.
Okay?
I mean, there's gonna be times where age matters. Maybe at 50, they only wanna give them 1 lot, but then they get to be 80, they're like, oh man.
You better get your butt over here and take care of me.
Yeah.
Maybe they change their mind and they wanna, you know, as part of a farm, they wanna start their own.
Yeah.
I don't know what people wanna do, I'm trying not to
Yeah,
limit it. what
And
they
I
wanna do.
just think 8 is
Yeah.
too limiting.
Okay.
9,
And then the last one that we have on the books is, needs to be titled to the grantee for 3 years. Most other jurisdictions that have some sort of family exemption require an affidavit to that effect, saying this is for a family member, they acknowledge that they're not exempt from any other provisions, that kind of thing. And that gets recorded, so if I go to buy your property and it's a family exempted lot, I'm put on notice that, hey, I'm not supposed to buy this yet.
Tax certificate.
So otherwise
Yeah.
someone's just subdividing it, and we don't deal with the real estate transactions, so if someone tries to get a family exempted lot and then they sell it to somebody that's not qualified, we would never know.
So, can we, so how do, is it possible to roll this process into being allowed for anybody?
How do you mean?
Well, so that in, kinda how I mentioned before, so that I could sell the lot instead of having to give it to a family member.
Yeah, then
I mean,
you,
does that make it, what, I mean,
Well, we
'Cause then
still
it's-
have the
at that
rules.
point,
You
yeah.
can do 3 lots off a shared access easement
Mhm.
without going to family exemption.
that's right.
You can divide off a property if you have enough, road frontage for 2 lots. There's still ways to divide your property without having to go for family exemption. Family exemption is to keep you from having to, exempt you from rules that you would never be able to meet. So mostly it's, road frontage, internal road standards, that kind of thing. So if you have your property and you've got maybe 1 or 2 family exemption lots, it'd be a little bit tricky, maybe working an easement in for just selling off additional lots, or you could have some on the road if you have enough road frontage. So there are ways to divide your land without having to go through family exemption. When I look at plats that come in, family exemption is one of the last things I look for. If I can't get it to work under anything else, I look at family exemption.
And I think what you're describing, Andy, would be, if you tried to add verbiage that you could have it for someone for sale, you'd essentially have a staggered system where somebody could subdivide property to 1 acre for any reason. So you'd have, essentially a 1 acre lot, minimum, lot size in AGC. It's just staggered out over time through the exemption.
which is what this creates, it just puts a
It
middleman
limits
in
it
the,
to family.
Yeah.
it just puts a middleman in the process for
Right.
years.
That's right. Ideally, people will live there longer if that's truly their intent. The 3 years is just so that people aren't doing a bait and switch with a developer that's using them as a strong.
Get that in them times to pass on before they know what they did.
Well, we also have it in the code that your will supersedes what the code says. So if you pass away and you wanna divide your land into 20 lots, 1 acre lots, if you can make it, if there's a picture showing us, you have to be pretty specific about how you want it done, if it's not gonna be code. If you have a picture with it, you can't just say, I leave this equally to 20 people, that, we can't divide it off that. But we can divide it if you have a picture. So I hate telling people that, cause I'm like, well, when you die, you can have it set up a certain way. And I've had a couple people who wanna leave land to family or trying to do it now, but it's not possible, they won't meet any code. I'm like, well, have your surveyor kinda draft out what you wanna do and put it with your will,
Oh.
so.
Yeah, that's a statutory thing, so, yeah, wills and court orders, they all supersede
Probate,
them.
that kind of stuff.
So if there's no way for us to, police number 9, is there any reason to have it?
Deterrent?
I know, but so my opinion is that if you aren't gonna police and check up on a regulation, then don't do it if it's just there for the scare tactic that has no teeth or anything else.
Well, this would be akin to posting a speed limit, right?
But the police are out there verifying, and we'll catch you if
Not-
you
not on
drive
every road.
by.
Yeah.
But we don't, I mean,
But that's gonna
that
be,
wouldn't come
that's
up
gonna
at
be the
all.
real estate folks that are gonna pull that up.
Some schools in the rear.
Right. And they'll
Yeah.
say, hey, they're supposed to
That's
own
true.
this for 3
Okay.
years.
I say we just.
And if they,
Okay.
and if it becomes civil, if they go and sell it anyway, it's a civil matter, whatever.
Okay.
And the only other thing I could see about that is, in the event of a tragedy, like you lost your job or something, is there a way to?
Yep, there is a way around that.
There's a way.
Already in the code, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Then you covered all my.
Yeah, I think, there's like death or divorce and
Yeah.
other things that are.
Okay.
Natural disaster, I think is in there too.
Natural disaster.
Alright, so now that we've officially solved family exemptions.
We're moving beyond
Did
that.
we solve it? Are you happy with it?
Might as well be him.
Are you sure?
No, stop.
Don't cause
We're
any
moving
more
on.
indigestion.
So now that we solved that, I think,
Tama remind me of something.
this is a good time to revisit this topic, because I think that's what started this conversation. So the multiple dwellings on a lot, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping on your slide here, Marion, but they are not the same thing. So I think when we started this conversation, there was a thought that they are the same thing, but this is really for folks that, and there are very few instances in the county where people pursue this, is they want to have two large homes on a lot. You can have an ADU that's up to half the size of the existing lot, or you can subdivide. Most people want to do one of those two things. And with the rezonings, that's all been, somebody wants to give a lot to a family member so they can finance their home and make that work financially. So this is a distinct thing,
So, multiple dwellings on a lot. We have only one zoning, this is, to prevent crowding. You end up with mobile home parks without meaning to have mobile home parks. So that was I think that was probably the main goal, is to limit how many homes per lot. And it's come along too with science and everything about septic systems and that kind of thing. So there are outside rules that really affect this. Every code section, every residential and agricultural allows for an ADU, every single one of them. You can do a home half the heated space. The primary home has to be similar in design, and the ADU cannot be a manufactured home. The primary home can be a manufactured home, but the accessory dwelling unit has to be stick-built or modular. And that's another way to kind of control manufactured home parks popping up. So the only zoning designation that allows for two primary homes plus an ADU is AGC. That's the only one. Everybody else requires one. This does get conflated with family exemption, mostly by people who are, when you look at your neighbor's property, you cannot see their property lines. You see multiple homes on the property. So they don't necessarily understand that there's multiple lots on the property. They just think there's like 6 homes out there. So we deal with, there's some education when it comes to that kind of thing. And then with the AGC, it can only be 2 homes if they could be subdivided from each other with 2 5-acre lots. So you'd have to have at least 10 acres to put 2 homes. They'd have to be 60 feet apart so you could subdivide them and meet setbacks. That's how the current code.
And the concept there is, again, going on that concern that council had about spot zoning, so that if you are gonna put 2 on there, let's make sure that you can do it by right when you eventually come down the road and wanna subdivide it, and you don't force council to make that decision to rezone your property.
Mhm.
And history says they're gonna subdivide it. It's just how we've gone through it. So this may not be an issue anymore that we talked about family exemption, how we want family exemption to look. I think the only issue we had was AGC was now different. Used to be if your lot was AGC, no matter the size, you could put 2 homes on it. We do have a lot of non-standard AGC. And it was addressed that the 2 homes per 10 acres was a newer update, and that was kind of backing off, keeping a more rural standard instead of much more developed looking.
So that will take any direction that y'all have on, to make any changes to that standard.
And we went through it all. Most everybody was 1 dwelling unit per lot. Spartanburg County was the dividing from each other, and then Gaston County was the same way. Some of the areas were based on density. These would be much more rural areas where they would allow you, if you have 15 acres, you could do 3 homes, 1 per 5 acres. They didn't say they had to be spaced apart, so I thought that was interesting. You'd have 3 homes up front with 15 acres in the back. That's my planner brain going there on that one. So most have a density issue. They're trying to keep large lots with the home. But other places like Lancaster, Chester, Lancaster particularly with minimum lot size of 1 acre. So you could end up with.
Yeah, I highlighted Spartanburg and Gaston because those are almost word for word exactly how your county handles that today. The ones that do it by density You can see, they're all in the low country,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a lot of plantation properties, there's a lot of Goligichi property in there, so, there's a lot, just some properties where there's one piece of property and 100 people own it, a stake in it. So rather than trying to figure out how do we subdivide that fairly,
Family trees.
yeah, they allow multiple people to live on that same lot as long as they can keep the density, in check. So very complicated, we don't have that situation here in York County, so there's no need to get that complicated.
What do y'all think?
I say leave it.
And they, even with this, though, they still allow the accessory dwelling also, right?
Right,
That's right.
every single residential and agricultural designation.
But wasn't there arguing about this thing though, we was arguing about at one time that was with 5 acres?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
It didn't really specify before, it said AGC would allow 2 primary homes. You can have a 1 acre lot.
That's right, it did,
Yeah.
and didn't even really give acreage, did it?
Mhm. And y'all have seen a couple of the rezonings where people are trying to, you have like 3 acre AGC lot with 2 homes on it that were allowed, but now they're trying to divide them from each other, and you have to rezone in order to get that done.
So those are already out there, and they're gonna keep coming to y'all to rezone the
But
RUD.
have y'all ever seen any situations where it actually got them in trouble as far as the wells that tank jump was involved in the?
We have a lot of long fuse ones, again, that's Rick's favorite term, where you have 5 acre lot and they were allowed 2 homes on it, but they would put them close together. And they would share septic, or they'd share a well, and then they go to divide from each other, and all of a sudden, what are you gonna do with the well? What are you gonna do with the septic? Maybe it won't fit anymore. So that's got to be kind of an issue too, is we would allow sharing a well in some cases because we don't really specify that when subdividing. But the septic systems, you gotta have 2. So all of a sudden now you have to put in another septic system. So, and maybe the septic system that was there for 40 years no longer will handle anything. So it's one of those things that's trying to keep.
I don't know if I wanna live that close to septic systems.
The map gets tight, it gets really tight.
Yeah, so those
Especially on
properties that,
Blackjack.
Mm-hmm.
so
I
those
had no
properties
example
that
there.
did, utilize that, when it was maybe more financially, feasible to do it that way, they're out there, and as people, pass on or pass their property on, either way, those are gonna get subdivided or proposed for subdivision, they're gonna keep coming to y'all for rezoning those properties to RUD, but the way it's currently worded is to not create any more of those in the future.
Yeah.
Would require it to be a manufactured home, that way it has to be removed for anything.
Well, manufactured homes would now be allowed everywhere.
Well, I know, but you have to, I
But-
mean, you
Yeah.
couldn't have anything else, that way it has to be pulled off the property.
Ditch up that axle and go.
But in a way though, what we did with the family exemption should take care of our need here too.
Mhm.
That's what they say.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
look.
it's kind of a. But it is something that's commonly conflated with each other, because you can't see property lines.
Okay, you've seen this slide before, we're switching gears to the, much easier stuff, so this is, road frontage.
Promises.
So road frontage is primarily a safety thing, you don't wanna, especially on high frontage roads, have, lots crowded up on each other. So here, I think this, really explains it all. So here's the table that shows you, the minimum lot widths on arterial and collector roads. You can see it's 150 for all major collectors, and for our commercial districts or non-res districts, it's 150 feet on an arterial, and it's 350 feet for our residential districts. So that is definitely a big outlier. We've got 100 feet on minor roads, and then here is the DOT table. So driveway separation and lot width are different things, but you can see how they're related, right? how wide your lot is gonna dictate probably how close your driveway is to your neighbor's driveway. But when you're on a high-speed road, they're gonna look for much higher driveway spacing. So if you're over 50, they want each driveway to be 400 feet apart. So that's where they might come in on the back end of a subdivision being approved and say these need to be shared driveways, stuff like that. But this gives you an idea of what DOT is gonna require no matter what we require. But you can already see that 350 is a bit of an outlier, even on the DOT table. So here's a comparison about how other jurisdictions handle it. And here again, and if you took a look at it in the interim report, you can see the county's already an outlier on that 350 for an arterial. So our recommendation, keep it very simple, is to go back to this table and change this number from 350 to, change that number from 350 to 150.
Why was it, what was the idea behind the 350?
It's always been that way, so I couldn't explain why it came to be that way. My assumption is that it's residential, so we're concerned more about residential safety on existing major roads, arterial roads, than we are necessarily about folks leaving a commercial driveway.
I think our road we live on, we're major. How they determine that?
I don't know.
Glad you asked. It's in your interim report.
You know, Andy,
I tried to read it all.
I bet you did.
you read it,
I
and
read
you
most
didn't tell
of it.
me?
I read most of it. I've been doing taxes too, sorry.
So if you turn to page 27, that's got the list of the principal and minor arterials. So everything on page 27, all of those roads would be the arterials. And then everything that's on the next page would be the major collectors, so those would be what's 150. So this would change it so that all of these roads on both pages would be 150.
It's based on speed and, volume.
Mm-hmm.
So Black
Well, by
Highway,
George, that could change daily then, huh?
clearly Black Highway, they would say 350 feet of frontage for a new lot, for a new residential lot. This could change back down to 150, but we don't control the DOT allows them to have the driveways. So that's one of those, there's some
Well, see-
circumstances outside our control.
So, can we tie it to the driveway spacing?
It kind of is, right now.
Well, at 350, but if you get down to 30 mile an hour, if you have a low speed road, 35 mile an hour road, then you can do.
It's typically 100. So major, like the arterial
Yeah.
lots are the, Black Highway, Filbert Highway, 49,
Yeah.
Charlotte, that kind of thing. So those are the ones where, some of us are going 65 miles an hour,
Right.
trying to go somewhere. They're trying to keep some driveways stacking up.
Mm-hmm.
Don't roll in your eyes.
I didn't roll mine. Me? Oh, I'm looking at Tommy because I think his
What do you
was
think, Tommy?
concerned 350.
You okay?
Well, I watched The Last Stand on TV last night. It definitely was no major, minor, or nothing else. That joke was too much of a minor. That's a good movie. I don't know.
Because even, so here's my thoughts is, even if you reduce it there, they can't,
They would have to figure out
I
the
mean, even if they
driveway.
shared a driveway, the next two parcels can't have a driveway, so.
I mean, 150 feet is half of a football field, you know, so, and the speed of the road does count with that. But, I think like Marion said, you just don't wanna be stacking curb cuts because, and especially in a higher speed road, it can create a safety hazard as well.
I hope you got good brakes.
I just thought about the mailboxes,
And
the
it
mail
keeps people,
carrier,
yeah.
pull over every now and then. So, I know.
But then again, do we care? They cut it up in 20-foot pieces. Well, we do care, 'cause that was the
Yeah.
old way they used to do that stuff. Which made sense when we, anyway, so another story.
Well, I
Makes
mean,
sense
you
for
know,
a
you're
long
talking
time.
about this and out in the country, but I mean, it used to be when some of us were going to school, the school bus stopped at every driveway.
Mhm.
Now you can be out there in the dark, and them poor youngins are walking upside the road,
Yeah,
trying to
Mhm.
get to one driveway where the school bus stopped. Now, what's more dangerous?
Mhm.
All right, you convinced me, we're gonna have sidewalks on
Oh,
all,
boy.
all AGC land now.
Every road needs a sidewalk.
Y'all can blame that on Tommy for that.
Folks out there, don't y'all listen to him, I didn't do
It's
that.
for the kids.
So what do y'all think, keep it at 350, change it to
You have a
150,
problem?
something else?
There'll be gravel.
We haven't really found, so, you know, the 350 is a conservative number with safety considerations, right? That's why it's there. People do complain about that being a very large number, and it is a large number, so it's the trade-off of, do you trade some safe situations away for some more reasonable lot widths? I think that's a fair trade-off, and I think the table shows that even if we put it at 150, we're still at the higher end of what most other jurisdictions are doing.
I was thinking 200, if we really wanted to help people, cause you could put a shared driveway on every other grouping.
Well, the shared driveway, 3 lots off an easement, really, like the 350, I haven't seen that many, they're not complaining to me, they might be complaining above my head. But, if they have, even if they have substandard, like say you only have 200 feet along Black Highway, you can put an easement in and have 3 lots back there. Before, you wouldn't be able to do anything, cause you couldn't do the
Well,
easement.
And Darian's right, sorry to jump in front of you, Tommy, but the 3 lots off an easement, that's new, and that's solving a lot of, yeah, it's Marion's suggestion, and council adopted. So that's solving a lot of people's concerns about road frontage issues, so it's people.
And family exemption.
Yeah, people are finding that to be a good tool to solve a lot of problems, so really what we're talking about here is folks that wanna do a minor subdivision of 5, 6 lots on an existing county road, you know, how wide do their lots need to be?
Big
Well-
entities.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Over on Shallow, I noticed in that development close on 5 side, they did some shared driveways. Now, how has that worked out? Neighbors ain't tried to kill one another yet?
I haven't heard from the sheriff's department.
I mean, you know, they're one and then they
Mhm, and
split
then it
off
lines
like
up.
this, and
Yeah.
undoubtedly ain't nobody backed into one
What's that
yet,
one
or.
north of York? The, Stonecrest? Is it Stonecrest Meadows?
That did the share.
Yeah, there's like 5 or 6 lots that share one curb cut, so there's a road, cause the SCDOT, at the time, this was piano
Oh.
keys, so, SCDOT made them to share the curb cuts.
It's
And
essentially
that-
like a frontage road for
Yes.
6 residential lots.
And that
It's a
has caused
unique-
problems.
Unique thing.
Yeah, but like usually 2 people sharing a curb cut, we haven't heard that much. I haven't heard anything, put it that way.
Well, y'all recommended 150, is that gonna, does that help us?
Yeah, I think that reduces folks making a complaint that, and I have heard some folks speak at council meetings about,
Yeah.
oh, my road frontage, it used to be, it always was, the 350, but some people have made mention that, hey, I'd like to subdivide it, I don't have enough frontage to be able to do it based on the road that I live on.
I don't have any strong feelings, whatever you want.
I don't either. You have strong feelings. Okay.
I can't make mine grow no more, so.
We absolutely trust you explicitly.
What do you think about it?
Just one time.
Okay.
Okay, record
And that one day.
Say it one more
One
time.
Oh, it's recorded already.
I think 150's good.
Yeah.
I do.
Okay. Y'all are okay with it?
Dominoes won't get lost.
No.
Okay, setbacks, so, that's how far, a building is set back from front property line, and side property lines and rear property lines, but here, we focus really on, the frontage, cause we have, when the code was updated, there was a different, setback for agricultural structures versus residential structures, so that was 100 for ag structures, 50 for residential structures, so when the consultants consolidated it, it just went straight to 100, because that was the larger number. We don't, as staff, feel like there's a material difference to having an ag structure 50 feet away from the property line or 100. So our suggestion would just be to change this front yard setback from 100 to 50. So it would be back to the way it was, and essentially allow ag structures to be 50 feet from the property line instead of 100.
Front
Just,
property line.
just a question, I don't think there's that many prescriptive easement roads here, right?
It's civil, so they pop up when they pop up.
Yeah.
Okay,
They're
so-
not really, itemized as such,
Okay.
but yeah, they're definitely out there.
Oh, yeah.
Alright, but they're not proliferate. In other words, I come from a county with 700 miles of prescriptive easement roads, so,
No, we don't have
okay.
If it fit good, I want to smooth chicken.
We good with that one?
Now, it's my only point was gonna be is if there was a proliferation of prescriptive easement roads that might someday be developed, paid by the county, whatever, you might wanna make a little bit of an allowance.
To base it from the easement line, you're saying?
Yeah, mm-hmm.
But I do want to put back
I
in,
think that's a good point.
I do want to put back in the old act of putting the hog pen on the side of your acreage for the nuisance.
Sometimes if they are on a major highway,
So hog
There's
pens
a
are
highway
10 foot setback
expansion.
no matter what.
you
Yeah.
think about that
Especially if you
too.
have-
Put it on the nuisance side of your lot.
But I think
So
that's
you
not
will
gonna be
put
like
those
on the
on
inside.
So was there a good reason for the 100, other than just keeping
Well,
the
Just to be
barn
used. Yeah.
back?
I think it was.
Yeah.
And just, and to make it easier, it was just, well, let's make everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Just
odd
like
that, it was 100 in the front, because you would think that if you've got ag structures, you're not concerned necessarily about impacting the road, but your neighbor that might
Yeah.
not have ag.
But that, right down whenever you said that, like, there's places now, some of the places, no fault of anybody, because the roads have been changed. And I'm talking about, there's some places I'd be scared I'd see on my dang house, 'cause the roads have been cut up now, and they're right
Mhm.
up there. But then there's other places where, they literally live on the side of the road.
Mhm.
And like, I think when we got married and we put our trailer in, you had to be like 25 feet off of the property line.
Mhm.
But I've seen some places, I think at one time, only 10 foot was required.
That'll be the side property line, and sometimes determining which one is the front and side isn't always clear, especially if you have like the family exemption lots where they're kind of
Depending
out
on
in
where you
there.
stand, then it.
Yeah, so it's like, it can be a little unclear. I know a lot is the old structures that are really close to the road. Actually, the bigger problem they have are well houses in the right of way.
And down in Union, all them years, we used to go down there going to fairs and stuff, when you cross over Lockhart there.
Yeah,
Every year when I'd go down through, I always wondered why a car hadn't. Cause you literally see the tops of those houses.
Shipping containers.
So this came up as something we should talk about in the scope. So this is just to re-illustrate what those are. So there are these Connex containers, the big steel things. They are not the tractor trailers. Just want to make that distinction.
Van bodies.
Yeah, van bodies. So here is the existing language. That's all of it. They are currently allowed as a conditional use. So in certain zoning districts, so here the project we're talking about is in AGC and RUD in that space. So those are some of the districts that allow shipping containers. If it's an accessory to a dwelling, you have to have at least 5 acres and you're allowed to have 1. But otherwise the limitation is 3, and then all of them need to be screened. So that's the current language, and if you all have any thoughts on what might be changed there, certainly to take note of that. There's not a lot of comparisons for how other counties regulate it. Most of them see it as a temporary thing, if they regulate it. So we're a little bit unique in that. So happy to take any thoughts that you have on.
So my thoughts on that were on the larger lots in any district, let's say, acre and a half areas, or 2 acres, you could, in that, RSF 40 or whichever one we have nowadays, I don't even know which ones they are, but that those would be able to have a, shipping container.
So
Like I lived over in Shandon, I had a acre and a third or whatever it was, it was all wooded, everything around me was wooded, I mean, I could have had one in the back and would, in theory, wouldn't have affected anybody, nobody would have cared that it was back there. And I would like other people that are in that situation to have that opportunity.
Gotcha. So
I
that
have
would-
no problem.
So that would be a change to A, so instead of
Right.
controlling it by zoning district, and then that would also be a change to D, where there's a minimum lot size of 5 acres for
And
residential.
so the number and the maximum, so, the number says 3,
Right. Yeah,
the
it's
maximum says 1.
yeah, so it's confusing because it's a maximum of 3 shipping containers per lot, except as allowed in paragraph D. So if you're non-res, you can have 3. If you're residential, accessory to a residential use, you can have 1.
But,
Somebody change that to at least 2.
but the things make, just like talking about van bike trailers, they make exceptional good storage, especially on farms and industrial, whatever, and homeowners, but,
Mhm.
but not only that, now when you step it up a grade and say to the shipping containers, they also provide very quick access to building a metal building right quick like.
So that was my case on my land, on my 1 1/3 acres, I wanted to set 2, put the trusses across it, and it was cheaper than trying to build
Yeah.
either a metal building or anything else out there, and I could go and get it set up, it was dried in with a good floor, and then I had a little tractor, so I could park it under there.
Yeah,
But
that's the,
why couldn't,
that's the
I'm
trade. Sorry to cut you off, Tommy. But that's the trade-off that you have
Yeah.
with these things is they are relatively affordable compared to buildings, right? Large buildings with the square footage that you can get for a
Mhm.
shipping container. So they are easy to get relatively, and they are very functional on a property. The downside is that they rust and people don't take care of them,
They're
and
ugly.
people put them everywhere that they know is going to annoy their neighbors. And so it is a common code enforcement complaint. People know that you can't
Is it
have
really?
them.
Yeah.
Well, but if you could have them, then you wouldn't get as many complaints.
It wouldn't get the, people wouldn't, people would still complain. They
Okay.
wouldn't be able to do anything about it.
Right.
Is basically how that would work. And we have had some where people just, they're trying to thumb it to their neighbors and they put it right on the property line and they use it as a fence. And then the other people get mad about it and they put up their
that's
own.
when you put 6 and you make a hog pen.
So,
But the more common thing is people will start to neglect them and they rust out.
Yeah.
And they look pretty bad.
But that happens with every type of structure.
And you never know what's been on that flooring inside of them.
yeah. So what are you saying? Have you got a recommendation?
No, this is just to say that we know y'all wanted to talk about it. This is what the standard is currently.
Yeah.
I,
I'm sorry.
okay, I know that you have a friend that has these for their hay.
Yeah, I got them too.
Okay,
I mean,
and so AGC and RUD,
and RS-40 because you allowed horses and, yeah. But my question would be now, and y'all correct me, there ought to be a way to figure out by the size of the lot,
Mhm.
if we're gonna do this and try to do it so it don't look bad, by the size of the lot, what you should be able to have it,
So a special exception.
yeah. I mean,
Well, so this is a conditional use now, and these are the conditions.
yeah, but I mean, ain't y'all seen some people that go overboard buying utility buildings?
Yeah.
I've seen people that have 5 or 6, that they end up more utility buildings than they got house.
And that's really all of zoning, is somebody did an outlier thing, people didn't like it, so somebody put a max on something, right? That's all of zoning. So it is a conditional use, conditional accessory use. So those are the conditions currently, so you can modify them how you see fit.
Die laughing if everybody had a good book specialist.
Okay, so the minimum
I'm
is
trying to
3
kind of
shipping
learn
containers
guys.
per lot.
And see, GC, I have one there.
They, so like your Home Depots and others.
But-
they'll use them.
But answer me this, cause I've been waiting to ask this. Cause I even asked Tom, but we were in lunch. If originally zoning went into be to keep as like uses, what in the Sam Hill happened?
Things change.
Cause you damn right they changed.
Yeah.
Things got more complex.
Because now it has become more, no matter how we got here, whether people, like you said, complain, tried to but it still is control, and it's changed the demographics of the way, it's control. No matter how you look at it, I mean,
That's what.
you don't get
society
square
is.
dance on the weekends because they want noise stopped at 9 o'clock.
Well, not only do things, physical attributes of the world change, but people change too,
Oh, yeah.
and their tastes and preferences. And you know, I often tell the story of folks my age, our age, are used to suburban, post-World War II type development. You know, the Levitt towns and all that. But nowadays, and with the housing market the way it is, particularly with residential development, it's very, very different.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, I think that's where we're trying to cut the difference here between too much control and not enough control, while trying to guess and figure out what we think everybody in the community wants. It's a high wall to climb over, although you're all doing it very well.
So I'm guessing all zoning classes with minimum acre and a half and a minimum 50-foot setback, unless the other setback is great. I'm trying to think of
So
any
DA.
or something.
I think
Well,
50 would be the,
Yeah, 50 would be.
that would be the highest, now that y'all made the change on the other one. But,
So,
are you saying in addition to what's here, or that would be it?
No, that would be
Changing the
trying
zoning?
to fix up what's here, so it would be adding a setback to this. I don't know, maybe 50's too much.
so would you say like if somebody
I
had,
was trying to avoid what y'all said, which was stick them on the property line, 10
Right.
feet off
Yeah.
or whatever, and
But you could use another standard, but it's a little tougher to administer. Some zoning ordinance for certain things will say a minimum of 200 feet away from a residence or something.
yeah,
But I think setbacks are easier to manage.
yeah, because then you've got your thing, and somebody comes over here and builds a house, and now he messes up your side now.
Yeah.
Well, they do have to meet the minimum setbacks now, and the, screening where it shall be screened so they are not readily visible from adjacent lots or rights of way. So the
Oh.
ones that are out there, they're not doing that, but new ones and the ones that people
I saw the
complain
rights
about.
away, I missed the adjacent lot.
Yeah, so I think that might help a lot, if
Okay.
people actually abided by that.
Well, then, all uses and 1.5 acre.
You know,
And 2 per
Half the
lot.
setbacks.
Okay. So.
Number?
1.5 acre, not 5 acres.
Yes.
How many,
Yeah, number. Means we can get,
I mean, because somebody's gonna
Two.
always take
Two.
advantage. 2 on 1.5 acres?
Yeah, you put one on each side and then put your trusses across it.
well, that, you can do that, but what's if you wanna have them down there in the bottoms to put more hay in? And tie your food dogs
Condition it
in.
to, I mean, you're gonna have to have a whole table. If you've got 3 acres, you can have 3. If you got 5 acres, you can have 10. If you got 50
Well, I
acres,
can
you can
handle
have
that.
400.
Accessory to a use. So if it's just a residential use, you have 2 acres, you can have up to 2 comex
Yeah.
things, as long as they meet 50-foot setbacks and are screened from the neighbors.
I don't think, well, we discussed that it didn't need the 50-foot setback.
Yeah,
Just be screened so that
yeah.
it won't interfere with trying to be nice to other people.
Well, I can get
But
me
then
a
you
few
have-
more if I move them
But
daily.
if you have like an agricultural use, that's different. You
Yeah.
can add more for the use.
And an
That would-
agricultural use is gonna
If I
be
move
at
them
least
daily, I'm all
3
right.
to 5 acres.
Yeah.
What if you said something like a rolling scale, so you could have 1 per acre up to a maximum number?
And rounds up to the next number. That
Well,
gets into that, okay, so at 1.5, do you get 2 or do you get 1?
You get one.
Or you could start the table with, you could start the table with,
I think it's
1
too
acre,
much.
1.5 acre.
Ah,
you
do
get
you
2
like
acres.
Red Sake?
Alright, so
Well,
we
these
start
are
at
for the
1.5
school
acres
Mhm.
with
All
2,
farmers
and then you
do.
can have 1 per acre after that.
But a farmer's not gonna have just
Up
an
to-
acre.
Up to,
Is
I
an acre
don't
and
know
a half?
what,
A farmer gonna have
Uh,
acre and a half?
Fine.
No.
Tell me,
What?
how many,
How many's too many?
For me, if I could get a good deal on them, there's no there.
See,
How many do you want
that's
your neighbor
the
to have?
problem.
Yeah.
You're going to get.
My
each-
neighbor,
yeah.
if he can afford it, I mean, he can give me one of my big
Ag
buckets of
use-
them.
Ag use
I'm
is-
okay with that too, with
Yeah.
as many, but I'm still trying to be.
Are we
reasonable.
just talking about small acreage stuff?
Well, his idea was if you have 1.5 acres, you can have 2. You can have additional ones every acre above 1.5 acres you have.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah, but if you have
But where's
50
the
acres, you have
max?
50
Yeah, I
of
was
them.
gonna say,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
one?
Oh,
That's
so
a
you
lot.
found-
We're gonna have a con-
And they're gonna
Container
rust and
farm.
get in
Don't
the
back
Yeah.
on me
in the
now.
Well, it has to be an
streams and-
accessory use, so 50 comex.
If I get
units
enough
is
of them, I
not
want to put
accessory.
up barbed wire fences no more.
Well, that's what, so,
See,
if
now
it's
there
4
you go.
lot,
He is the perfect example of
A building a
over-
fortress.
That's what we need in this group.
overdoing it.
Debbie, I
Stretching.
assure you where I'm at, there ain't a soul that's looking at me.
I'd drive by and look at you.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I ain't putting them on the roadside, I'm putting them on the.
Personally, I'm for keeping it as it is.
Mm-mm.
That's me. That's just
Nah,
personal.
whatever.
I'm sorry, I'm probably outdated,
About a
but
maximum
when
of
this
20.
comes to council, we'll see how it goes.
Listen, you way up here, ain't nobody up here wanting no dang shit in
Yeah.
a
Oh, they
container.
do.
alright.
Oh, they do.
Really?
Oh, they do.
Put
I'm
that golf
telling
carts
you,
in.
I'm telling you that if you don't keep some kind of control,
Okay, 10.
Okay, so
10 what? 10
Max.
units on an acre?
No.
You want 10 units on an
On
acre?
10 acres.
So, what we're talking about, in planning talk, a container area ratio, for, which, I mean, that's an option, I suppose.
Yeah, a
But-
sliding
but-
scale.
Well,
But you might wanna cap it, and then how you calibrate it is the key,
Mm-hmm.
to where you gotta decide in the calibration when it's maybe too much.
Alright,
Well,
2
first
up
of
to
all-
2 acres, and then 2 for, and then 1 per every 2 acres.
1 per every 2 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then-
I would go with that.
You just think if you were still,
I
would
don't
be there.
care.
if you,
I
what
don't
if you needed
want
makeup
give
stores?
people-
If you
if
were
If you
still-
give them 1 inch,
Anything
they
that-
are gonna
I'm
take a
not
mile.
debating. I'm
And
not debating.
who is gonna be the container
Maximum
police?
density of
I don't know, but would you
Nobody-
want me to get rid of all
Nobody
my
will be
containers?
the container
The
police.
neighbor.
the neighbors.
We'll get someone.
Would you
to
want me to
post
get
it
rid
in
of all
the
my
street, police
tractors?
officer.
No,
Stop
but I
for a
mean,
mile
Tommy,
away.
you're different. You're
But here's the-
different.
You dang
Don't-
right I am.
If I have 100 acres.
You gotta
come on
think
back.
about every person in your county and what they're able to do.
That's right, so
Already.
just listen to me.
Tommy, I support you on all this. But you know what the lucky thing is
What?
that unless you get turned in, you won't get in trouble, so you can put
That's
$100
right.
back.
That's
Now,
right.
So
the
what-
container police may not come and see
Until you
you.
get
So you're
the
saying you need
neighbor.
at least 2 acres to have to.
Yeah.
No,
One per 2 acre.
1 to 2 acres is 2. No, see, now we've messed that up. So 1.5
So 50 to
2
100
See, it's
acres
so
is how
small.
many?
You just said 2 acres.
I know,
2
but I'm
acres, you
trying to
have
help.
1.
Cause at 1.5 acres, that's enough for a
No.
little shop.
Mm.
If I can have a 40 by 40 building, I can have those 2
Well, but
containers.
that's a
If I had
shipping
to-
container.
had a
We're
shop
talking
needed
about
containers,
a
I think
building
I'd need
versus a
2.
shipping container.
But I can get a pole barn or all sorts of stuff.
I would go with 2 acres.
Although you could cut a dwarf tree, never mind.
Y'all wanna vote on it? Someone articulate
Okay.
something? I definitely don't have consensus.
I don't even know how to make a motion. Somebody make a motion, not me, cause my motion would be 1 per 2 acres, and then I'm really not happy with that either.
Make motion.
Somebody make a motion.
But do you want a cap on the, you know, cause 1 to every 2 acres away, I mean, it
Yeah,
can go.
we're gonna cap it.
Okay,
We're gonna cap it at 10.
okay.
10.
For-
Everybody out there, 10.
10.
For how many
Yeah.
acres on the
You have to
10?
have
You'd
20.
have to have 20 acres. So they're not gonna put one on every 2 acres, they're gonna stack them all side by side in the back of the property.
Then we're gonna build a platform.
Sounds like an ADU to me.
Our beautiful AGC, okay, make your motion, or you.
Still has to be used. This is modern technology for use on AGC. Exchange.
Can we put in there that they can't rust, they have to have some kind of sealant?
Screening.
No,
We can say screening. So if it rusts, you can't see it.
I like the rusty look better than the bright pink look that they'll be.
Okay,
All
make a
right, motion is, 1.5, let's see,
No.
no, gonna do in all zoning districts, 1.5 acres to 1.5 acres, you get 2 and 1 per every 2 acres
Thereafter.
thereafter.
So you,
Oh,
so
there
at
after.
3 acres, you can get another. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Second.
Up to,
With the cap.
up to 10.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you
All
for
in
keeping me
favor?
straight.
Aye.
All opposed?
Motion
Not
carries.
gonna, I'm not, we'll see how council.
That's what they get for
Okay.
putting us through all this thing.
Yes.
Well, we might wanna buy some more hose and rakes and all that kind
Oh,
of stuff.
That's
yeah,
it.
we
Made it to the end.
You made it!
Well, now, see, we ain't in the HOA.
But it'd be good for storage of your race cars.
No,
we're
that's
in
where you
an
need to
HOA.
put 2 of
We're
them together.
not
But
gonna
you
have
can go
it.
buy you some land out
Yeah,
there
big tires.
and put,
Your ATVs.
Yeah, there you go.
so thank y'all, that was very helpful, I thought that was very productive.
Oh, don't lie to us, you
No,
did
I
it.
understand.
I would say with most of
And
them.
we saved
I am
the,
in
by
shock.
complete
What?
accident, we saved the most controversial topic for last.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, well.
By complete accident, we saved the biggest argument for
Yes.
last.
It was supposed to be the simplest.
You're in shock.
No, I am in shock.
Why?
Because I think that's hideous.
Why? Because in our
I
job
do not
titles and the
like-
stuff
I do
that
not
we
like-
use, that,
I'm
that's part of
fine
our
for the
business.
I'm fine for
Why would we still have
AGC.
another agenda
I
item?
said I was fine for that, but your other
Yes,
zoning, I
that was
mean,
the item on approving the minutes. is all.
I assure you, I don't think you gotta worry about
okay, we've got
no
one more.
shipping container being in your.
Okay, so, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from February the 11th?
Ready to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we have anything in executive session? Yay. Okay, we are adjourned
Yes.
at